And a good evening and welcome to everyone to this meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee, especially those members of the public who are watching the streaming of the meeting online. I am Councillor Clive Hooker, Chairman of this committee. The members joining me this evening on this committee are Councillors Adrian Abbs, Phil Barnett, Jeff Cant, Hilary Cole, Caroline Culver, Dennis Bennyworth, Tony Vickers, our Vice Chairman, and Howard Wollaston. And the officers that are in attendance to advise and support the meeting this evening are Simon Till and Sean Cutts, our two planning officers, Paul Goddard, our highways engineer, Kim Mayer, who's the committee legal advisor this evening, and Jenny Legg, who will act as our clerk. I'm also assisted this evening by Stephen Chard, who will be the Zoom host and of the meeting this evening. I will now ask our clerk, Jenny Legg, to remind members and other attendees about the way we conduct council meetings via Zoom. Mrs. Legg.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. Standard Zoom reminders will be shared on screen shortly. In addition to those points, if it becomes necessary for any members to telephone into the meeting, they won't be able to signal to speak. Therefore, once everyone has raised the Zoom hand has spoken, I will ask the Chairman to invite anyone who is joined by telephone to speak in order. Voting on the planning applications will take place via a named vote. Members will be asked in turn by the legal advisor how they wish to vote, by stating they are for or against the proposal, or if they wish to abstain. Please remember to unmute yourself when voting. Any other votes will be conducted via a show of actual hands during the meeting. Unless the committee asks for the vote to be recorded, the outcome of the named vote will not appear in the minutes. So anyone wishing their vote to be recorded must indicate this before the vote is taken. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the Chairman will adjourn and advise the committee of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it is a short adjournment, you will be able to rejoin the Zoom meeting. Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be sent out. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed?
Thank you, Mrs. Legg. Members, we now move on to the first item of the agenda this evening, apologies. Do we have any apologies, Mrs. Legg, please?
We don't have any apologies for this committee, Chairman.
Thank you. We move on to item 2. This is regarding the minutes, members. I have to report that the minutes of the meetings held on the 4th and the 11th of November will be carried over to our next meeting, which will be held on the 16th of December. This is due to some technical difficulties of which, unfortunately, we could not produce those minutes in time. Item 3 we'll move on to, which is members of any declarations of interest, please. Councillor Cant, you're on top of my list. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small thing, just to say that I have been canvassed on the Coley Farm development issued by the developers, but not by any members of the community within the ward, the Clay Hill ward adjacent to the application. I shall contribute to the debate, but I shan't be speaking more formally as the ward member.
Thank you. Councillor Wollaston. You're muted.
Muted, yeah.
My apologies. I have been lobbied by the opposers to the Coley Farm application.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm the ward member for Cheveley and Cold Ash. With regard to the Coley Farm application, I'm not a member of Cold Ash Parish Council, and therefore this application, I have not expressed any views on this application at all. With regard to the application, the Winterbourne application, White Cottage, that application was considered by Cheveley Parish Council as an adjacent parish, and I will visit this application afresh this evening and make my decision on the information that's put before us. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Sorry. Yeah. Yes. I just would like to point out that on page 12, where it's quoted from Spokes, those were my words, but it was the previous application. I'm pretty sure I couldn't find them on the portal for this application. but I do remember commenting at some stage on this site.
This site being?
Coley Farm site. I can't remember whether it was the previous application or this application.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Spokes comment on this application, but it may have been the last one.
Thank you.
Go. But I will be speaking and voting on this application.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
2 declarations, Chairman. Firstly, I've been lobbied both written and phone calls regarding Coley Farm. And secondly, obviously, I'm a member of Newbury Town Council and its Planning and Highways Committee. But tonight I'll listen and weigh up all the information in front of me before making judgment on any application.
Thank you. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been lobbied by opponents of the Coley Farm application.
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
Same declaration, be lobbied by opponents, including other councillors.
Thank you. And Councillor Bennyworth.
Chairman, yeah, ditto for me, please. I've been lobbied on objectors to Coley Farm.
Thank you. Are they all logged, Mrs. Legg? Thank you. Well, we'll move on now to item 4 of the agenda, which are the planning applications. And this evening we have 3. The first one we're going to be looking at is Coley Farm at Stony Lane. The second one will be Ricketts Gate Farm at Hampstead Marshall. And the third application is White Cottage North Heath at Cheveley. For the benefit of those watching online, I'll briefly go through the format of each application. The officers will present the application to the committee. The drawings, site plans and any deemed relevant material submitted on the planning file will be shown as part of that presentation. I will then invite the clerk to read out the 500-word submissions. These will be shown on the screen for additional clarity from the following groups and in this order. Firstly, the parish council, then any objectors, supporters, and then the agent or applicant. On conclusion of each of those 4 500-word submissions, I will ask members if they have any questions of clarification on that submission or of the individual 500-word submissions of which the members of the committee will have received copies and will have read. If they have, the attendees, should they have requested to attend, will be invited into the meeting to answer any questions. If they do not have any questions, the attendees will not be invited into the meeting. On conclusion of answering any questions, the attendees will be invited back into the waiting room. I will then invite the ward member, and in addition, for the first application of the agenda this evening, that of Foley Farm, the adjoining member will be given the opportunity to speak. They will have 5 minutes each to present their case. Should more than one ward member or adjoining ward member wish to speak, and they have opposing views regarding that application, they will have 5 minutes each to speak. Members may then, on the conclusion of each of their presentations, ask questions of clarification of those members. A bit different this evening and a bit more complicated, members, but hopefully we will get through that situation. The committee members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification of the officers. The committee will then debate the application and vote on the decision. I hope for those members of the public watching that is reasonably clear. We'll now move on to the first application before the committee this evening, and that is the application 20/00604. This is full. This is Coley Farm, Stony Lane, Ashmore Green, and this is the erection of 70 plus houses with associated access parking, internal roads, drainage, landscaping, children's play space and other associated infrastructure. And that will be explained to us in more detail from the case officer, Simon Till. Mr. Till, please. And this has come to committee because of more than 10 letters of objection. Mr. Till.
Thank you, Chairman. If you just bear with me a second, I shall share my screen. Is everybody seeing the presentation screen?
Thank you. That's very good.
Members, this application is for the erection of 75 dwellings in land at Coley Farm, east of Stony Lane on the border of Newbury Clay Hill and Coldash. Land forming the northern part of the access falls within the Coldash and Cheveley ward, while land forming the southern part of the site and the southern access falls within the Newbury Clay Hill ward. The site is located entirely within the parish of Coldash. The application site is land within the settlement boundary, apart from the northern access along Stony Lane and part of the western boundary of Stony Lane. The application has been brought to committee due to having received 87 letters of objection in total. In terms of principle, it's important to note that the site is both allocated for 75 houses and has an extant planning permission, which is an outline consent granted in 2017 for the erection of 75 houses that includes layout, access and an approved mix of housing. It's therefore the case officer's position that we support the principle of development as proposed. I'd also ask you to note that while objections have raised the loss of open space, the site is allocated for this development and the outline permission includes the same level of open space provision in the same location, which is to the south of the site. Aside from open space, the key impacts identified in the officer's report are landscape impact, the impact on neighbouring amenity, the impact on highway safety and the impact on ecology and trees, as well as the impact on archaeology. The proposal includes a policy compliant provision of 40% affordable housing, which is pepper potted through the site with an affordable housing mix approved by the housing officer. That is the affordable housing plan. In terms of design, the proposals are of traditional character and appearance with a predominantly red brick palette that is considered to respond well to surrounding development and the suburban edge location. In terms of impact on the surrounding landscape, the proposed scheme is sufficiently similar to the layout approved under the outline planning permission that the level of impact is not substantially different between the two schemes. The site is elevated and the main impacts of the work have been assessed as being along Stony Lane in terms of public views. The application includes a detailed scheme of landscaping proposals that will soften the impacts of development over time. Officers do accept that the proposals will alter the character of the landscape immediately surrounding the site, but to some extent this is an impact that was accepted in allocating the site and in granting the outline planning permission in 2017. Additionally, as noted at 2.2.4 of the officer's report, the scheme proposed will remove the need for retaining structures that would increase the level of landscape impact by exacerbating the appearance of the change in levels across the site. And the new proposals which eliminate the need for these works would be an improvement on the impact of the scheme granted outline permission. Officers are of the view that the landscape impact will not be more detrimental than the level of impact accepted when allocating the site and not sufficient to merit refusal of this application. Regarding the impact on neighbouring amenity, the case officer has made a detailed assessment of the relationship between dwellings on the site and in Wansey Close and Loud Close to the south. While there is a close relationship between some of the existing dwellings, and it might help you if I go back to a site plan at this point, not that one. This one, so you can see on the southeastern boundary you have a close relationship between some of the dwellings. So while there is a close relationship between some of the existing dwellings and the proposed retention of trees and lack of direct overlooking is considered sufficient in the case of most of these dwellings to prevent an undue loss of privacy and an amenity. While in the cases of 2 of the 7 dwellings identified existing and proposed in the report, the distance between the opposing windows is over 21 metres, as recommended in the Council's guidance. Members, the officer report does note that in the case of the relationship between plot 48 and 17 Wandsey Gardens, which if you can see, it's down to the bottom right of this, the second to last dwelling. The separation distance is only 15.5 metres. The report confirms that existing trees along this boundary, which already screen windows on the northern elevation of number 17 Wandsey Gardens, will screen the existing and proposed dwellings, and on balance, this relationship isn't considered sufficiently harmful to merit a reason for refusal of the application. In your officer's view, therefore, the proposed works aren't considered to result in undue levels of impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties. Amenity space on the site is generally well laid out and accordance with the recommendations of the SPD. In terms of layout, I would also ask members to note that an initial objection from the Police Crime Prevention Design Advisor in respect of the use of parking courts has been overcome by reconfiguration of the flats to the east of the site to have frontage facing onto the parking. In respect of highway safety, again, the proposals involve improvements by removing a secondary access, while speed reduction measures and improvements to visibility are proposed. While objections refer to the reliance of occupants on the private motor car, the extant outline permission and allocation of the site both allow for development of the amount of housing proposed in this location. The location is in settlement and alongside other housing. Levels of parking provision are satisfactory and the Highways Authority has not objected. In respect of ecology, members will note that the ecologist has reviewed the application and has raised no objections subject to the agreed mitigation strategy being implemented. There are TPO trees to the northeast of the site as well, as well as a detailed landscaping scheme. The scheme is accompanied by tree protection and arboricultural works schemes to secure the retention of existing trees of value. The site has been subject to a desk-based assessment for archaeology, which has identified the need for further field assessment work to be carried out. This is recommended to be secured by way of condition, and the archaeologist hasn't objected as long as that condition is implemented. Members, for comparison, this is the extant outline layout which is approved. Objections to the application raise concerns in respect of drainage. Members, part of the reason behind this resubmission is to provide improved drainage measures that comply with best practice standards in respect to the provision of suds. The site includes 2 attenuation ponds, and the drainage engineer has assessed the proposals and recommended a condition that will address the detailed design of the suds measures, subject to which he is satisfied with the proposals. I'll just show a few photos of the existing site. Those are the farm buildings which are for demolition, and members should note that the potential for presence of bats has been identified. The ecologist has considered mitigation details in respect of that matter. There you have the northern view from Stony Lane, and there you have the southern view from Stony Lane. And that is an overview of the site in aerial photography. Members, turning to your update sheet, I would ask you to note that point 1 raises a few matters of clarification, while point 2 clarifies the matters matter of the ward boundaries, which I've covered. The update includes updated conditions in respect of highways design, the speed limit restriction and landscaping. Members, subject to the conditions recommended in the agenda and on the update sheet, your officer's recommendation is for approval of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Till. Members, I'm going to invite Mr. Goddard to come in here with any observations on the highways matters. As we see, this whole development access is off Stony Lane. Mr. Goddard.
Thank you, Chairman. As mentioned by Mr. Till, this is an allocated site and also has the benefit of an outline consent. So all traffic and access issues were considered last time round. Notwithstanding that, there are some slight modifications to access provisions to the site. With the outline stage, there was a secondary access to the north of the main access that served 5 dwellings. That's now been deleted, so there is now just a single access serving the whole site. The off-site highway works that were approved at outline stage are still being provided, that being the widening of Stony Lane up to and just beyond the proposed access, the extension of a 30-mile-per-hour limit to just north of the site, and the provision of a footway from the site down to the south to connect to existing footways. So tonight, your purpose with reserve matters planning application is to consider the layout of the site. Your highway officers are content with the layout of the site. The roads and the layout are designed in such a way that they can be all adopted as public highway. The proposal complies with your parking standards, and for all standards we involved provision of cycle storage. There are also across the site the number of electric vehicle charging points that I requested. So in conclusion, Chairman, your highway officers are content with the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Members, we now come to the submissions from our public. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Legg if she'd firstly read out the submission we've received from Coldash Parish Council, I think. Mrs. Legg.
Can't hear you, Jenny.
I think you're muted, Mrs. Legg.
I am muted. Apologies. Classic.
If you share your screen with us again, please.
Yeah. There we go. Try again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. On the 2nd of July 2019, West Berkshire councillors unanimously declared a climate emergency. This was followed 6 months later with the Council's Environment Strategy 2020 to 2030. A central part of that strategy involves re-evaluating policies and decisions inherited prior to the emergency, and as with all emergencies, acting currently and resolutely before events overtake us. Paragraph 6.2.5 places great stress on reviewing planning with a view to carbon neutrality. Nature recovery 6.2.6, protecting and enhancing our natural environment 6.1.5, healthy communities 5.3. This crucial section is about sustainable transport, walking and cycling, which is especially relevant to Coley Farm. To encourage active travel, such as Go Kinetic, Walk to School Week and Bikeability. West Berkshire's commitment and leadership on the climate emergency is impressive, but as with all things that create short-term costs and challenges, the key to such policies is, will the council actually follow through? In the vernacular of our time, will West Berkshire Council put its money where its mouth is? Because it is difficult to find a planning proposal, there is more odds with that widely admired and supported environment strategy than this development at Coley Farm. On every single count, it fails and fails badly. In a word, it's a development that is not just a blight on the open landscape countryside and a lovely lane, it's a blight on the climate emergency. The very idea of a child walking to school from an estate at Coley Farm is nonsense. Up a 1 in 12 hill, then down a dark, narrow road, very few adults will walk, let alone children. To the shop, the doctor, the bus, it's simply not going to happen. People will go by car. There's flooding too. There's concreting over a beautiful field. There's terrible traffic access and incredibly steep estate streets, enough to deter the most enthusiastic cyclists. Why is this development even being considered? Because of a perverse decision many years ago to include these fields in the DPD, when West Berkshire Council was behind on housing supply, well before signing up to the climate emergency. The DPD was then, this is now. It's time all of us acted with the sensibilities of our planet in mind. The Council's environment strategy specifically requires reviewing planning decisions. Today, there is no need to go ahead with this development anyway. West Berkshire Council is ahead of governmental land supply requirements, and the developer does not see Coley Farm as any kind of priority. Otherwise, why would they have delayed for over 3 years? So the question for every councillor is inescapable. Do you want to ignore the declaration of a climate emergency and rip up the council's environment strategy, or will councillors vote against this flawed and environmentally backward development? If so, perhaps it will be the first indication that West Berkshire Council really are taking the climate emergency seriously. That's the end of the Parish Council presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Ragg. We've resumed our screen. Members, I have Councillor Vickers' hand up. I assume that is that he has a question of clarification. I do have Councillor Bernard Clark in the waiting room. Is that the case, Councillor Vickers? I
do have a question relating to the statement that's just been read out. I'm not sure it's clarification, but it's
that's fine. Thank you.
Of the Parish Council's views on a matter that is referred to there. Yes.
Thank you. Then if I could ask Mr. Shah to invite Councillor Clark into the meeting.
Yes, just doing so, Chairman, and I can see Mr. Clark is with us. Hopefully you can hear us.
Councillor Clark, can you hear me? You're muted at the moment. If you'd like to unmute. And if you're able, are you able to...
Can you now hear me, Chairman?
Yes. Are you able to turn on your video?
I can.
Thank you. Let's see how you look this evening.
There we go.
There we are. Councillor Clark, nice to see you again. Welcome to the meeting. Councillor Vickers has a question for you, sir, on your submission. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, in your submission, you talk about a 1 in 12 hill, and I presume that's the main estate road, and then down a dark, narrow road. There was on the previous application a different route for pedestrians out of the site, roughly where the leap, I think it's called, is halfway up the hill. Would you not agree, therefore, that if we could reinstate that route across the open space which the council owns, that would, to a significant extent, make this estate more walkable, shall we say, or even cyclable if you made it a dual-use path?
I think it would make a small difference. I mean, ultimately, if you're talking about going all the way to the shops, because or to the bus stop or whatever, you're still coming from quite a low area, the bowl of the field, if you like. You still have to go up and then you come down. But it would be less up and down, I do agree. It's still the same distance, though. It's a fair.
So if we have to have this development, you'd quite like to have that, would you?
I think it would improve a flawed development. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Any more questions for Councillor Clark, members? No, I don't. Councillor Clark, nice to see you again, sir. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'll invite you to retire.
And thank you for inviting us and Cold Ash as well.
Thank you very much. Good night. Members, we now move on to the other submissions that we've received. We've had no submissions from any, yes we do, we have a submission from the objectors. This is from, I think, 2 people are in the waiting room should we have any questions, but I'll ask Mrs. Legg to read out the objector's submission.
Yes, Chairman, I think Councillor Cole had her hand up. I don't know if she had a question.
No blue hand. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't. Thank you.
No.
Back to you, Mrs. Legg.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Just share my screen. So this is a summary of the objections by officers. The site is awkwardly placed between congested roads in the Thatcham and Newbury directions and the single track quiet lane to the north. There are significant gradients both within the site. This is not apparent.
Like it might help.
Sorry, a bit bigger.
Please.
Yeah. Better?
Keep going. Thank you.
This is not apparent from the developer's submission. We also know from our own measurements that many of the developer's distances are underestimates. It will therefore be hard work to travel on foot or bicycle to and from local facilities. Car use will be the norm, thereby adding to local congestion. The lane is used a great deal by walkers, cyclists and horse riders as a quiet route. This will be disrupted, if not wiped out, by the urbanisation and increased traffic both during and after construction. The gradient and impermeable clay of the site makes flooding of the vulnerable Manor Park area below it a real possibility. Unproven flood alleviation measures are in the proposal, but who will maintain them? Similar provisions in Manor Park have never been maintained and are now choked with vegetation. The average rainfall in the area, oh, sorry, I've lost my place. Has there been maintained? The average rainfall in the area has increased sharply since 2017. 857.9 millimetres of rain fell in Thatcham in the last 12 months versus 151.89 millimetres in the same period in 2016-17. The removal of about 180 metres of established hedge will destroy wildlife habitat and contribute to the urbanisation that this proposal presents. Queries are raised over what environmental studies have taken place. The site is used by wildlife creatures. The development looks like a city block transported to the edge of Newbury, and it even includes some 3-storey buildings that are completely out of character within the area. The developer is being allowed to count the existing public open space as part of the development, thus letting them off such provision inside the site. We object to the lack of consultation on this issue. As locals, we know that the existing public open space is extremely wet for much of the year, which will make it unpleasant to use. The increased pressure on local services, in particular schools and GPs, has not been considered in the proposal, and thus the impact on existing residents. Utilities have come under increasing pressure since 2017, and more home working will intensify this pressure. West Berkshire Council has declared a climate emergency, yet there is nothing sustainable in this proposal other than a marginal improvement in insulation above the minimum requirement of the building regulations. It is not even low carbon ready, for example, by using underfloor heating compatible with heat pumps. The design of the proposal is 10 years out of date. There is widespread alarm amongst existing residents concerning how they will be affected. The outline application received a petition of over 500 names. The development will turn Waller Drive into a rat run. There are a number of empty buildings in Newbury and other brownfield sites which can be used. The site is valued recreational land for local residents. The proposal scheme will irreparably damage the character of the area. Green space should be protected. That's the objectors.
Yeah, there we are. Now the members, thank you, Mrs. Legg. I see Councillor Vickers has his hand up. Therefore, Mr. Shard, would you kindly invite Mr. Barclay and Mr. Benjamin into the meeting, please?
Doing so now, Chairman.
Good evening, gentlemen. Mr. Barclay, I can see you. Mr.
Good evening.
Benjamin, are you going to speak on behalf of Mr. Benjamin? Mr. Barclay?
No, Mr. Benjamin, I'm sure will speak for himself.
Thank you.
Yes, I am here.
Can you turn on your video, sir, or are you just going to do it with your...
Sorry. Yeah, I'm unmuted, but not on... there we are.
Plenty of time. Welcome, and good evening to you both. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
We do have some questions for you on your submission, and the first one is from Councillor Tony Vickers. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you. I don't know whether either of you gentlemen were the author of the objection letter from Straight Elms Farm, but the lady who wrote that, or the people who wrote that, because they're not named, refer to their children enjoying recreation on Coley Farm fields. So I was going to ask that person, but I can ask you as residents of the area, whether you would appreciate using the specially designed and built playground for your children that is going to be created on the open space next to the development as part of this development.
Yes, if I had children which were still young enough to use that, which I don't. Yes, it is a nice, in its way, it's a nice contribution. But as we pointed out, the field as a whole is soaking wet for much of the year and very muddy. So I think that yes, it is an improvement, but doesn't really make up for all the rest of the development.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barnett next, please.
Yes, I'm not quite certain which one of you will be prepared to answer it, but obviously in your submission, you talk about rat running down Waller Drive. I mean, that obviously is the road which links the Turnpike and Turnpike Road and Stony Lane, and it's well known as obviously a access route to evade the traffic calming. Is your thoughts around excess amount of vehicles using that road, or are you thinking specifically in relationship to speed? So the question would be, firstly, would you consider a 20-mile-an-hour more appropriate than 30? Or would you also feel that there was a need for some form of traffic calming? Because I'm going to put a similar question to the highways engineer in a few minutes in relationship to Stony Lane. But as you didn't mention Stony Lane, I obviously will keep that out. That's the first question. And the second question, you were talking about excess amount of water being generated from the area of the proposed development. Am I correct in thinking 2007, 2012, 14, the road at the bottom of Fleetwood Drive, I think it is, and Waller Drive was underwater for a period of time?
Yes, there certainly was flooding there, and in fact, the flooding went all the way down to Turnpike Road and right through the estate there, flooding various properties in that sort of low dip that extends down. So yes, there was a water collected in that area, quite noticeably. I think we feel that Manor Park in particular, and the streets below it, all the way down through the Turnpike Road area, is all at the mercy of this development if this flood alleviation isn't right.
I would add on to that as well and just say, evidence is quite clear along Waller Drive of the level of flooding that happens. Even, the last few weeks that there was flooding across the road there that shows the amount of water that does exist in this area. And as such, it doesn't take a genius to just go and look at the current situation to see the volume of water coming down that hill needs to be addressed, and adding more hard lay is only going to exacerbate the problem. On to the question you raised about the traffic point, it's volume of traffic, right? Stony Lane is a single track road for the majority. In fact, one of the flaws that I personally see in the design and don't feel this is well accounted for is that the diagrams, I believe, are not accurate on the road width. In fact, even the aerial diagram just now showed a significant portion of people's houses actually being consumed into the width of the road on the aerial diagram. So I do question the accuracy of the measurements being taken into for that. But simply put, the volume of traffic generated by this development is not sustainable by the roads. And in fact, recently we've had numerous incidents on the road where lorries of unacceptable size have caused significant issues. And, we've seen the issues that has caused even with the low level of traffic that we have today. So adding more traffic would only exacerbate problems on the roads.
Thank you, gentlemen, for those answers. I think it's Councillor Abbs who's got a question for you now. Councillor Abbs.
Chair, in the presentation, it talks about distances, inaccuracies in the distances. Could you give us some example, please, of just how inaccurate the distances are between the planning application and what you've measured yourselves?
Yes, I mean, I think some of this was taken into Councillor Simpson's consideration will be in his presentation, but I thought that I took part in some of the measurement by actually pushing a wheel around the area, and it wasn't unusual to see something like a 10% inaccuracy on the distances, 10% low. In other words, and if there were errors, they mainly seem to be in the developer's favour, funnily enough. Yes, I didn't see any that were the other way. There were none that were high. They were all low to those sort of numbers, about 10%.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I would refer to the objections that were raised at the original one, where these inaccuracies were raised in detail and actually were demonstrated in the original objections that were provided the first time round.
Councillor Abbs, do you have another question?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Councillor Pennyworth.
Chairman, and good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. You mentioned in the statement unproven flood alleviation. Could you expand on that, please?
Well, I'm not a flood engineer, of course. But from what I've read on the subject, this whole business of SUDS is a fairly new area and has really come to the fore since Thatcham was flooded 10 or so years ago. My own view, having read up on it, as I said, I'm not an engineer, is that it's sticking a finger in the air stuff in terms of how well it will actually work in practice. But I'm afraid I can't provide the engineering justification for what I've said.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Culver. Councillor.
Hello, Mr. Barclay and Mr. Benjamin. I've seen reference to hedgerows having been removed in recent times. Are you aware of that, and do you know when that happened?
Can you be more specific?
I saw something about, I think it was on the southern boundary of the site, some hedgerows had already been removed.
I don't
know anything's been taken away yet.
This wasn't part of the presentation, and maybe if Mr. Benjamin can't give an answer, I will ask him maybe to say that I'm not qualified to give an answer to that question.
No, I'm sorry, I can't help you on that one.
Yeah, I think the only thing I can think of, just to refer to that, there was a situation recently where a mobile phone was removed by pulling it through the hedgerow. So that obviously removed some hedgerows in that respect when they removed a mobile phone rather than on the road through the hedge.
Councillor Cole, would you have another question?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Benjamin and Mr. Barclay, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And I'd like you to return to the waiting room.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Mrs. Legg, we do not have any submissions of support, but I understand we do have a submission from the agent, Kerry Flegger. Could we have that submission, please? This is from Pegasus, their company.
Yes, Chairman, this is from the agent. Coley Farm is allocated for approximately 75 dwellings in the Housing Allocations DBD, which was adopted in 2017. The site is subject to an extant outline planning permission for 75 dwellings, which includes full approval for access and layout. Donington New Homes has prepared a reserved matters application, which could be submitted if necessary in advance of the outline consent expiring on 1st of May 2021. Donington New Homes are a local developer based in Newbury who are fully committed to delivering a high quality residential development at Coley Farm. A full application is submitted, rather a reserved matter application to seek approval for a higher quality development than that currently permitted. The scheme before you has evolved following significant consultation with officers, including affordable housing, drainage and highways officers. 4 key improvements that would be delivered through the current proposals are: 1. Delivery of a drainage scheme that accords with recent best practice, including the management of surface water in smaller quantities by spreading SUDS features through the site. The drainage scheme approved by the Council's drainage officer would deliver betterment compared to the approved drainage scheme, which itself already achieves a reduced surface water runoff rate compared to the existing greenfield rate. The drainage scheme will ensure storm water is routed away from new and existing properties, particularly the adjacent downhill properties at Wandsey Gardens and Lord Close, and also makes allowance for increases to impermeable areas in the future. Reduce loss of vegetation along stony lanes through the creation of a singular vehicular access and the reduction of the speed limit of Stony Lane to 30 miles per hour along the frontage and to the north of the application site. Reduce need and reliance on significant retaining structures between properties and greater opportunity for landscaping by way of a revised site layout, reducing overshadowing and overlooking that would be caused by the approved scheme. Number 4. Delivery of an approved affordable housing mix in consultation with the Council's affordable housing officer, delivering a higher proportion of family dwellings. An additional 3 number 3 bedroom properties will be delivered and 2 number 4 bedroom properties will be provided, together with an overall increase in affordable floor area. All affordable properties will meet minimum space standards and the 4 bedroom units will exceed these. As a local business, Donington New Homes employ local people at their offices in Newbury and are committed to using local supply chains and employing local trades. As part of their commitment to delivering a high quality development, an energy statement has been submitted which commits to achieve a minimum of 10% reduction in emissions over building regulations. The application proposals fully accord with West Berkshire Site Allocation DPD and core strategy, providing 40% affordable housing and an opportunity to secure a higher quality development compared to the extant consent which will be built out should this application be refused. It is therefore respectfully requested that planning permission is granted in accordance with officers' recommendations. That's the end of the presentation.
Mrs. Legg. Mr. Chard, I see we have 2 councillors who have questions, so if you kindly invite Kerry Flager of Pegasus into the meeting. And good evening. Kerry, I'm sure you can hear me if you turn on your... Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, madam. Nice to see you again. I apologise if I don't pronounce your name correctly, but
you did, so thank you.
Well done, well done. Well, we have 2 questions. Oh, we have several questions now for you. The first one is from Councillor Vickers. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, it's me going first. You might have gathered the thrust of my questions is about the previous application and the fact that it showed a path going across the open space. And you talk about this being a higher quality development. In my mind, the access is not higher, not better for those who have to walk and bike to the site if they don't have access to it from that path crossing the open space, thereby saving themselves 5 meters of height gain on every journey. Would you agree to that and therefore agree to reinstating that path as shown on the previous application?
In terms of the path, there's a path being provided along Stony Lane, adjacent to Stony Lane and through the existing public open space. So what path is it that you are?
The path you're offering to provide requires everybody who lives on that site to climb up a hill, which is 1 in 12, which is way outside what's recommended in the manual for streets. Whereas a path that I'm talking about, which would be halfway up the southern boundary, and I mean up because it's a hilly site, would avoid quite a significant amount of the climb. And it was shown on the previous application and it's not shown on the current one, other than taking people into the leap. What I want is to see that path going beyond as it was shown on the previous application. Otherwise,
this isn't a discussion. You may want it, but this is a question to Ms. Flager.
Ms. Flager wasn't clear about the path that I meant, so I wanted to be absolutely clear in my question, Chairman.
You just place your...
Well, yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, obviously, the footpath is not provided as part of this application at the moment. It's something that I'd have to discuss with the applicants. I mean, we feel that the footpath along Stony Lane provides access, and obviously there's access into the public open space from this development. So, but it's something that I'd have to discuss with the applicant and with officers.
Thank you.
Right, so you can't speak on behalf of the applicant. I'll pity that.
Councillor Culver, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, Mrs. Flager. I was just interested in the attenuation pond that's been proposed. Do you know what plans there are for the long-term maintenance of that pond?
Well, there's 2 ponds proposed. In terms of the long-term maintenance, that's something that would have to be discussed with the council in terms of adoption. So it would either be adopted by West Berkshire or it would be a private management company.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abbs, please. Sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm sorry, I lost you on my screen. So a couple of questions about what's written down. It says, Dodgton New Homes are prepared to have prepared or has prepared a reserve matters application which could be submitted if necessary. So could you expand on what you mean by that sentence in the written submission?
Yes, so a reserve matters application has been prepared. Pegasus have prepared a reserve matters application, and as I said, it is ready to be submitted. The preference, as we said, was presented in the officer's report. This is considered to be a higher quality development, and that's the reason why we've submitted a new full application rather than submitting a reserve matters application. Details of layout are approved as part of the outline consent. Details of access and layout is considered that a better layout can be achieved in terms of levels, less retaining structures. We've obviously got the single access point, improved drainage, improved affordable housing provision, and that's the reason for submitting a full application. But if the full application was refused, then there is a reserve matters application that could come in fairly quickly and certainly way before the outline consent expires in May.
Excellent, thank you. And I just wanted to make sure I'd understood that you were saying you would fall back to a different one.
Yes.
You also mentioned that it will meet the minimum space standard as one of the comments made. Is that subject to debate that you meet the minimum? Or?
No, so there's national space. There are national space standards. It's a national standard, and also West Berks Affordable Housing SPD sets out minimum space standards, and we do meet those. And that's been agreed with the Affordable Housing Officer that we do meet those standards, and we exceed them for 4-bedroomed properties.
Okay, but am I meant to infer that that's a positive that you met the minimum?
Yes,
because
I think it is, because minimum
you actually had a choice, but
well, minimum space standards are not a requirement by West Berkshire at the moment in terms of national minimum space standards. I'm sure they probably will be in due course, but in terms of affordable housing, yes, minimum space standards are encouraged, and so we have exceeded it for the 4-bedroomed units.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Abbs. And we now move on to Councillor Bennyworth. Councillor Bennyworth, you are muted. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, I froze momentarily there. I do apologise. Thank you very much. Just wanted further clarification, if I could, please, on the 10% reduction in emissions in the energy statement. Could you clarify, please?
Well, we are offering, so we've submitted an energy statement, and that would deliver. That's a commitment to delivering a 10% reduction in emissions over building regulations. As it stands at the moment, that is not it's not proposed to be a condition by the planning officer. But if members felt that they wanted to secure that, then they could attach it as a condition. It's not a condition on the extant consent at the moment, so it would be an improvement over another improvement over the extant consent.
Thank you very much.
And finally, Councillor Barnett.
Right, question, please. It's been partially asked of by Councillor Vickers when he was talking about the height, the actual lie of the land in regarding the gradient of the site. Majority of the affordable housing is towards the east of the development, which means, of course, access and egress in the sites are going to be on quite a rise in level. These proposed residents, I suspect, will be probably young families with youngsters that need to go to nursery or school and going off the site a couple times a day. It could well be a bit of a struggle. Had consideration been given to reposition the affordable units in a different way so that it wasn't a struggle for perhaps families that need to get, and probably could well be families that haven't got the availability of a vehicle to actually get off the site itself.
And we've entered quite substantial discussions with the Affordable Housing Officer and the Planning Officer during the course of the application to pepper pot the affordable housing around the site. And it was a specific requirement from the Affordable Housing Officer that she wanted to see the affordable housing pepper potted, and it is more pepper potted than it was in the extant consent. So I think there is affordable housing across the whole site. I think if it was to be concentrated in one area, then we would get criticised for it not being pepper potted. So yes, a lot of consideration has gone into where the affordable units are.
Okay, thanks.
Chairman, can I add one point, go back to a question that was raised earlier about the footpath? I've just had some clarification from the applicant. Would that be okay?
Yes, please do.
Okay, yes, so in relation to the footpath, the applicant has just sent me a message to say that they would be happy to provide that footpath, and it could go into the Section 106 agreement, which is yet to be compiled and signed. So we can agree
Thank
to
you
that.
to the applicant from me on that.
I think that was for Councillor Vickers.
Councillor Vickers, yes.
You're happy, good. And we have one more question from Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Can you give any confidence to this committee that we won't be looking at a revised number of affordable housing a little further down the line when a viability study, financial viability study, shows that that you're losing money hand over fist?
I can give as much assurance as I can. It has certainly not been something that's discussed. So we've gone into extensive discussions with the planning officer, the affordable housing officer. This application was submitted back in February, and the developer is keen to implement the consent, and that's something that's been conveyed to the planning officer on numerous occasions. We've been trying to get this application to committee, I think, since about August, because the applicant is keen to commence development. So no, I think I can give you assurance that, as far as I'm aware, this application, well, this site will not be coming back for revisions as you suggest, and that it will be built out if planning permission is granted.
That's good to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, members, for your questions. And Ms. Flager, thank you very much for attending this evening. And I'll kindly invite you to go back into the waiting room, and you can listen to the rest of the debate there. Thank you for your attendance this evening. Members, we now come on to our ward members. And this evening, our ward members are Councillor Beck and Councillor Cant. Councillor Beck has shown a desire to address us this evening. Councillor Beck will make his contribution during the debate. So if I could ask Mr. Shard, please, to invite Councillor Beck in. Good evening, Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Chairman.
Now then, Councillor Beck, I'll just go through the formalities. As you know, you have 5 minutes. Should you require it, I'll give you some indication when you've been running for 4. And then in your last minute, I'll give you a sort of 10 seconds reminder to conclude. When you're ready, sir, I will start the clock.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Yes, you're away.
Right. Members, officers and residents, this site has already received outline planning permission. Therefore, the building of houses on this site surely will take place at some point. Accordingly, members, I set before you for your most serious consideration this evening a number of points that, in my view, require clarification. Are you confident to permit the building of houses on plot numbers 47, 48 and 50, taking into account the close proximity to existing houses? Between plot 48 and 17 Wandsey Gardens, the distance of 50.5 metres is below our guidance of 21 metres. Between plot 50 and 18, it's 17.4 metres. Between plot 47 and 6 Lord Close, it's 17.5 metres. Simon previously indicated to you that possibly the officers are satisfied with that situation.
Councillor Beck, thank you. You're back. You muted for a minute. I've stopped the clock. Continue. You've gone mute again. Thank you. You're back.
Can you hear me okay?
Thank you.
Yes. What I'm asking is, are you going to accept these substandards? Might it not be a good idea to review the exact placement of these 4 houses within the site? Under ecology on 6.40, it talks about placing a convent over the northern boundary hedge to ensure its retention. In 3 of heads of terms of section 106 agreement, it refers to a convent area. Surely these references should be to a covenant. That's purely a twiddle. Under 6.44, it mentions the retention of 2 PTO trees, but seemingly ignores the previous reference under 612, where it says 2 TPO trees and non-TPO trees, which will also be retained. Under consultation, spokes have, in my view, rightly raised the issue of the developer potentially enabling a strip of land 2 metres wide south of the attenuation pond to be set aside from plots 48 to 51 to the corner adjacent to the boundary of the site. This is to allow for a possible future link through to Fleetwood Close. I strongly support this initiative, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beck.
Conditions 7, travel plan, it says should be annually reviewed. I asked that for how many years should these be carried on? I think we need an end date. Something of considerable concern now, number 11 in the conditions, the gradient of private drive. It says should not exceed 1 in 8 where buildings are likely to be occupied by the mobility impaired. In those instances, they say they should be 1 in 12. How does anyone know which units are likely to be occupied by the mobility impaired? It could be any unit. How do we resolve this? Should the whole site be all 1 in 8?
1 minute, Councillor Beck. 1 minute.
Yes.
1 minute.
Under 18, sustainable drainage, and the K, it refers to include details of the preferred foul water pumping station. Who is going to operate this? Thames Water or who? Coming to 31, the landscape and ecological management. Under G, it talks about that details have to be provided of the organisation responsible for the implementation of the plan. I would strongly recommend that West Berkshire Council should undertake this with a lump sum payment from the developer. There have been previous examples.
You've gone mute, Councillor Beck. You're muted. If you could turn your microphone on, sir.
Right, you are. Can you hear me?
Yes, back in. I'll give you another 10 seconds.
Right you are. Finally, members, in the energy statement given by the developer, it talks about this 10% improvement. This was mentioned this evening by the lady on behalf of the agent. And she indicated they would accept a condition on this matter. Can I ask you to strongly impose that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. I'm sorry you broke down a little bit there in your transmission, but I think, members, we all got a reasonable idea of Councillor Beck's presentation. Members, do we have any questions of Councillor Beck, please? No, I don't have any questions of Councillor Beck. Mr. Shard, if you could invite Councillor Beck back into the waiting room. Thank you. Councillor Beck has now left us. Members, this is the application where there are adjoining members, and we have Councillor Simpson and Councillor Cole. Members, these councillors have given an indication that they have opposing views on this application. Therefore, by the Constitution, they will have 5 minutes each, should they desire it, to address us. Councillor Cole has agreed to go first. Councillor Cole, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Although I'm now co-ward member for the expanded Cheveley and Coldash ward, and this site is in Coldash parish, the developable area is in the Clay Hill ward. This site was identified in the HSA DPD, which was adopted in 2017 as suitable for 75 dwellings. There's an extant consent for these, and as we've heard this evening, there is a reserved matters application which is already prepared for submission. The application before us tonight is a variation on this permission, and in my view is a much better scheme, as the developer has taken into account comments made by residents, parish and town councils, ward members and officers in presenting this application. This includes drainage, addressing the level constraints, improving the public open space and visibility displays, as well as pepper potting the affordable homes throughout the site. Although Coldash Parish Council's very emotive presentation makes reference to the Council's climate emergency declaration and the Council's environment strategy, these do not trump our current planning policies. And this application has to be determined according to the policies enshrined in our current local plan. And while we take our commitment to climate change and the environment seriously, we cannot and should not ignore our planning policies, as this is the route to planning by appeal. And we would look foolish as an authority and lose all credibility if we consistently refuse applications on sites which have been approved by council and are set out in our local plan. I support this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any questions of clarification of Councillor Cole's presentation, members? I do. Councillor Abbs, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Cole, you said we should uphold our policies. We have a specific policy that would be in breach here, one that is 21 metres, but is several houses are at 15 metres. How do you square that off, please?
I think there's been, I think in the reports there's been sufficient mitigation for this, and that's been clearly explained, Councillor Abbs.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Abbs, do you want to come back? No, okay, thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Well, probably a question. We obviously haven't heard the presentation from Councillor Simpson, but it was a question which I was going to ask both. So I'll ask Councillor Cole first. Do you think this site is a sustainable development in its entirety?
Yes, I do, Councillor Barnett. Otherwise, I wouldn't be supporting it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. We now move on to Councillor Simpson. He's in the room with us. Councillor Simpson, you're well aware of the situation. When you're ready to go, sir, you'll have 5 minutes, and I will give you indication at 4 should you need it, and 10 seconds to conclude. When you're ready, Councillor.
Sorry to interrupt, Chairman. Councillor Colbert did have her hand raised there.
Oh, I don't
put it down again now. She might be okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that indication, Mr. Shah. Back to Councillor Simpson. Are you ready, Councillor?
Yes, I'm ready, Chair. Thank you.
When you're ready.
Now, this site's possibly the worst one in the Greater Newbury area to build 75 houses. It's too remote from the shops facilities. It's stranded up the escarpment and visually highly prominent in difficult terrain with steep gradients in many directions. In a beautiful valley ringed by 3 historic copses and field patterns, and technically difficult with all the flooding and runoff problems, and it's a much-loved quiet lane. The application papers explain that the full extent status was needed, was necessary because of working towards Reserve Matters final design. It was found the new layout was required with improved suds and better treatment of the gradients. Yes, I can understand those, but not mentioned was the SIL money has been extended to May 21 on the original outline, and the developers gained time to further delay build until house prices increase even further and build in a post-COVID world using 10-year-old building regulations, which are ripe for renewal in this state of climate emergency. Most of you have received a briefing pack compiled by me with help from interested residents. In this, we've debunked the transport assessment, which is why it failed at the original WAP in 2017. An audit of exact distances was made using a builder's wheel all over the place, and we found variance on, I think, 21 out of 27 popular destinations, and frankly, quite disingenuous presentations. And there are many adverse understatements, especially so since distances did not include the estate differences by road and footpath. Now, I'd like to point out that some of these estate distances, whether by road or by footpath, are unbelievably high. For example, the northeast and northwest, the range is anywhere, the northeast and the east-southeast part, which is where a considerable portion of the social housing exists. The range on the extra distance involved is 187 meters to 368. And now quite a lot of the other social housing, which is in the southwest corner, is actually split ownership. So the Manual for Streets guidance is just not met in any way. And there are several reasons for this. It's failed to comply with HSDPD policy, which was written in the time when we had a 5-year housing supply. The acceptance of 75 houses was a mistake. The officers should have run it down and not accepted the upper limit as a given. It's meant that green space, standardized green space policies have been compromised, and it's a joke. And it is admitted as so, but it's considered acceptable in the round. The topography of the site is horrendous and steep, and it's hard to work. And there needs to be extensive flood retention ponds by virtue of its location. The result of Coley Farm is it's a labyrinth with amazing variance in extra estate distances. So,
1 minute, Councillor Simpson. 1 minute.
Yeah, sure. A lot has moved with it since the outline, and we've got 8 years planned supply. Recognise the HSA DPD is losing weight. A state of climate emergency and recovery strategy are in operation. You've seen Coldash Parish's statement. I honestly believe that it's time that we all lived up and stepped up to the plate and were morally cognizant of what we're doing and not just signing off things which are no longer needed. So a central part of our strategy is re-evaluating policies. So my recommendation is refuse this policy. Do you have any questions? I am hungry for questions on quiet lanes. Am I a NIMBY? Accuracy of the work we've done. Fine. Just grill me with questions.
Thank you. We do have some questions for you, Councillor Simpson. First, Councillor Colver.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Simpson, I was wondering
Yes.
if you could tell us a bit about the village design statement and how, whether or not you think this application meets the demands of that document. And secondly, what do you think of the attenuation ponds and who do you think ought to be managing those in the future? What's your view on that?
The answer to the latter one is I am personally, I would much prefer to see the West Berks Council be asked to manage them, because I think the climate change risks are still so very high. And the other one again, our VDS, well, it's already in the carried over as a policy. We're a neighbourhood development group. The VDS has had very little, is in fact of a key influence, and is pretty much the same with very fine tinkering with. So it's important and has to be recognised in the future, and will be in our and the existing VDS is relevant because the civil parish is what is registered for our neighbourhood development plan. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad you mentioned quiet lanes, Councillor Simpson, because it is mentioned in one of the objective statements. It's also mentioned in the transport statement by the applicant, but I spent some time this afternoon trying to find any reference to quiet lane in Stony Lane on the council website, as is claimed by the applicant. So can you tell me what evidence you have that Stony Lane is a quiet lane, as he's claimed?
It's registered as that. Is it?
So it's just not very easy to find the register then?
No, it's referred to, and I've heard Brian Little quote it, and it's accepted as that. The carriage width is only 3.3 meters wide. In number of
are there signs up? Because you're supposed to have signs defining on the ground where quiet lanes are there? Okay.
I've requested that they be put in place. There's been so much trouble with heavy goods vehicles that, and the latest one took 6 hours to clear it out, and over thousands of pounds of damage, and deliveries broken up. And the highways have agreed, but they're hampered with COVID-19 at the moment in supply of them. But signs saying unsuitable for heavy good vehicles are going in at Waller Drive and at the junction of Stony Lane with Ashmore Green Road.
Thank you.
And I've requested that additionally, the quiet lane status is put on.
Thank you very much. We have another one from Councillor Kent now. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair. As a ward councillor of Clay Hill, and obviously living in a community that will be very significantly impacted by what happens as a result of this this development if it's passed, I just would like some clarification from Councillor Simpson as to where he thinks this would take us. As far as I can understand it, we have extensive planning consent in outline, and are you just for clarity, are you suggesting, what are you suggesting we do about that? Are you suggesting we take a position effectively against the original planning consent in its totality, or what is it you hope to get out of this position you're taking? Specifically, what would you like to happen?
Personally, morally, I think we should be. I think the transport statement was very, very bad, and I've proved it. I proved it at the time in the Western Area Planning Committee where the application was lost. It was only reversed at the DPC by the chairman's vote, which was by Councillor Cole. I regard this as something that should be stopped.
So you really think we should try to stop this and then let it go to appeal?
There must be easier places in the district.
No, I fully understand your position, Councillor, since I've much to do with that. If we were back where we were then on the original application, I would probably be taking a different position. But my pragmatic view is I wonder what it is exactly you hope we can do in the face of an extant. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for your response.
I leave that to the balance, the balance and wisdom of the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Well, I think out of fairness, I better ask the same question, although I'm sure I'm going to get a very short answer from Councillor Simpson.
If it's exactly the same question, then don't ask it because we need to.
Sorry, does Councillor Simpson feel it's a sustainable development? And also, I'd like to just ask, you used the word Greater Newbury, and I'd just perhaps like to have further clarification what he meant by Greater Newbury.
Anything near the clarification on that is anything near to the existing settlement. Now, I would like to give you the opportunity, if you would all write these down, some numbers.
Councillor Simpson, you've had a question and you've given your answer. I don't want members to have to.
No, he asked whether it was sustainable, and I was going to give you.
If you could just do them reasonably sharply, please.
Yes. Just a moment. The lack of HSA 3 compliance, it was, I think, the 75 houses, a range of 187 to 368 extra meters before you even get out onto the street to walk to any popular destinations. The bus service is only every 30 minutes. And the census of the gradients are 8 to 9% on site, which has probably been moderated to 7%, but there's a 100-meter straight stretch of site, which many of these social houses are have to come up, and 5.6% on Stony Lane. And then understand this, in the census of 2011, if you drill down into the super output layers, you find that Manor Park, which is the near part of our parish, is the distance to average to work is 16 kilometres, and 60% of people use their car. Whereas for the whole of Coldash Parish, it's 15 to 22 kilometres and only 41%. I'm absolutely convinced that the transport statement is erroneous and is form over substance, and we've proved it, and it's unsustainable development, and worse, even worse, building regs, and we've had Grenfell, and we've got a climate emergency on our hands. I think this is morally irreprehensible, and I'm happy for it to go to appeal. I recommend it for going for appeal if you feel as strongly as I do. You can ask me whether I'm a NIMBY.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I've one question, Councillor Simpson. Am I right in assuming that you were in the council when this DPD came to council? And am I right in assuming that when we voted on this document, members were unanimous?
I was not in the DPC. I pitched at the DPs. To be honest, I can't remember. I pitched.
Thank you. That's lovely. That's fine. Any more questions for Councillor Simpson? No, we don't. Councillor Simpson, thank you for your contribution tonight.
Pleasure.
I'll ask Mr. Shard to invite you to go back into the waiting room. Thank you very much. Members, quite an extensive question and answer session there. It's approaching 8 o'clock and it's now time for us to ask some questions of clarification of Mr. Till's presentation, if you can remember that far back. Members, we do. I'm going to go straight in with Councillor Abbs, please. Councillor Abbs, question for Mr. Till.
Thank you very much, Chair. It comes to the heart of the matter, which is at this stage, there's normally 5 things that we can look at with an application: appearance, means of accessing, landscaping, layout and scale. from what I've heard so far, means of access and layout are not, we're not allowed to consider. So can Mr. Till please confirm that is the case, that we're only allowed to look at appearance, landscaping and scale in this particular application?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Abbs. This is a slightly complicated situation because it is a full planning application. The matters of layout and access were considered and approved in the outline planning permission granted in 2017. However, due to the revisions that I've discussed, which substantially relate to the levels on the site and the drainage, which essentially would have been somewhat problematic both by the developer's standards and our own in terms of landscape impact and the ability of the site to drain to best practice standards. The applicant has elected to submit a full planning application under which all matters can be considered. But members should be mindful that the outline planning permission represents the applicant's fallback position. And unless members are very satisfied that the layout and the access proposed would be significantly worse than that approved on the outline permission, then the possibility for an appeal and costs award might be a consideration in deciding your view on those matters.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Sorry, Chair, I needed to get that in my head before I asked the actual questions because we were told specifically that two of those we couldn't consider, but that's clearer now. So the questions I have you, Mr. Till, are to do with layout, scale and appearance. You mentioned red brick and that's in line with what goes on, but as soon as I look at was it Wannsey Gardens and all around that is in fact yellowish brick with a little red and flint. So in fact, most of the houses nearby this proposed are not anything like what's being proposed. So could you give me why you think red is important? The layout, why are we breaking the 15-metre rule on several houses? And scale, why are we allowing or thinking of allowing 3-storey buildings when there's none of those around? Thank you.
Thank you. So in respect of the choice of materials, members, you should consider not only what is prevalent within the surrounding area, and there is a mixture of high and low quality development in the surrounding area. There are a mixture of high and low quality materials in the surrounding area. In officer's view, the red brick is an appropriate response to the character of the surrounding area, as are the traditional house designs. In respect of scale, the scale, including 3-storey dwellings, is actually a matter that's reflected in the layout of the approved outline scheme, where there are buildings proposed that would be blocks of flats of a 3-storey character. So there's no difference in terms of the impact of the scale of this scheme and the scale of the outline scheme as it would result in coming through in detail. Councillor Abbs, you'll have to forgive me. Can you just remind me of the third matter that you raised in your question?
Yes, it was simply the 15-metre stuff when in fact our rule is 21.
Okay, so the guidance in terms of the impact on neighbouring amenity is that generally we should seek for a 21-metre separation distance. Sometimes it isn't possible to achieve a 21-metre separation distance. In this respect, it refers to one dwelling where there is a 15.5-metre separation between a bedroom window, which I understand is a secondary bedroom window, and the bedroom window of one of the new properties, plot 48, on the proposed scheme. In that respect, there is retention of existing landscaping along that boundary that would provide quite a significant amount of screening. So our case officer has made quite a close evaluation of that matter and doesn't feel that on balance that relationship is sufficiently poor to merit a reason for refusal of this particular application.
Thank you. I move on now to Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Till, for your presentation. The objector's statement, there was mention of an unproven flood alleviation. Would you like to comment on that, please?
The flood alleviation is the subject of the drainage scheme. Flood alleviation details, drainage details, the calculations, the detailed calculations and information that have gone into designing the drainage scheme are all fed into by that background work. The drainage scheme itself is a best practice drainage scheme. It seeks betterment over greenfield runoff rate. A best practice scheme should achieve a reduced flood risk by comparison to what is there at present. So my comment on that is we've had our qualified drainage engineer go over it, and the drainage engineer is absolutely satisfied that the proposed works won't only result in a mitigation of the flood risk, but they will result in a betterment and less flood risk for existing residents and residents of the proposed site.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cant.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, there are two things really that I'd like to ask you about. One of which is that probably not before time, there's a much bigger emphasis now falling on improving the quality of the way in which we deal with emissions and the greening of the atmosphere. And the latest thing, I guess, has been that I believe a discussion by the government on banning the use of gas heating in houses in 3 years' time in their construction. My concern, I guess, is that we're going to get a rush of developers, and this may be one, who are rushing to get consent in detail based on the fact they can reduce the costs of construction if they can get ahead of the tighter rules that I think are quite right on improving the quality of construction in this country to make it more sympathetic to the environment. Is there a way in which we can, I think in fact the advocate for the developer hinted at this, is there a way in which you can construct a condition we can insert into this which imposes a responsibility on the developer? Bear in mind, I think we have no choice other than to grant this in some form to meet much higher standards than we presently work to in terms of the construction and its durability and its sustainability in environmental terms. That's one. So it's probably a fairly straightforward one. It's a long sentence. The second thing, and the thing that's worried me for some while, is that within the Clayhill ward, if you go to government sites, you find that the level of emissions, particulates in the air, is highest in, I think, Kiln Road, adjacent to where I live, and within the ward, leading to the Robin Hood roundabout, and in Shore Road particularly, are amongst the highest, if not the highest, in the entire West Berks area. My concern is that there's no reference in any of the traffic review of traffic flows to the impact of the additional traffic that will then flow into Newbury from this development and its effect on the air quality. I'm particularly concerned because obviously that's a route which large numbers of children attending the Trinity School pass in the morning and evening peak periods. So I just wonder if you could address the issue of whether or not that is considered as an issue, the spin-off effect on emissions and the health of the population, when considering traffic flows.
Mr. Till, you might like to pass that part of the question over to Mr. Goddard. Mr. Goddard, later on.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Cant, I think the Chairman's absolutely right that I'm going to give you part of an answer, and I may fall back on Mr. Goddard to give you the other part of the answer. In respect to climate change and reduction in emissions, what was alluded to by the agent is that the applicant submitted a emission statement with the planning application that demonstrated that the development would achieve a 10% reduction in emissions beyond that currently required under the building regulations. Now, I have to caution members, first of all, that in respect of applying conditions regarding reductions in such things as emissions or such things as climate change addressing measures, mitigation strategies, the council doesn't have a formal policy in this respect, and we are operating under a plan-led system. So the correct procedure outlined in the MPPF is for the local plan to bring forward the policy that regulates those measures, and then for us officers and you as members to implement that policy when considering applications. However, the applicant has made an offer, and that offer is to have a condition that secures the requirement for delivery of that emission statement. And members, I am satisfied that should you wish to approve this application, and within the resolution to stipulate that you wanted a condition securing those measures to be delivered, then officers could go about drafting a condition in order to do that.
Well, thank you, Simon. Sorry, Simon, can I pause you momentarily and say thank you? That's very helpful. Could we also say that, say in that condition that whatever, if there are likely, I suspect, to be rapid changes in the requirements on construction over the next several years as the government hopefully turns its attention to this issue, can we make it past that condition, bearing in mind that it may be a couple of years before the builder chooses to construct the property, that and will a condition that says and will comply with all conditions that prevail at the time of construction? Or is that not necessary? Will that be?
Thank you, Councillor Cant. My advice on that would be that in all likelihood, the measures for carbon reduction that the government is seeking will be delivered first and foremost through improvements to the building regulations. And the building regulations at the time that the development is built will be whatever the building regulations are. I would advise members to be a bit careful about veering into the territory of the building regulations, because that does go beyond planning. In respect of vehicle emissions, I think I'd like to refer you over to Mr. Goddard in that respect and see if there's anything for me to pick up once he's done talking about that. Mr. Goddard, Chairman, would you allow that question to be referred over?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Goddard, would you like that repeating, or did you get the gist of Mr. Cant's question?
My understanding is that Mr. Cant was asking whether traffic increases on Kiln Road from this development were considered at outline stage, and whether there was any consideration to air quality. To answer that question, obviously that would have been considered at outline stage, to my knowledge. To provide more detailed information, I can do this now. I would need to interrogate the previous transport assessment that was submitted at outline stage and provide some figures, which I'm happy to do, but it might take me a little while.
Thank you. We'll come back to you maybe a little later. Would that be okay?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
You're quite happy with that, Mr. Councillor Cant? Yeah, good.
Thank you,
we've got quite a few more questions. So, Councillor Cole next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. What I want Mr. Till to clarify, please, is the status of this land. Some of the speakers have referred to it as public open space and recreational land. What is the status of it? My view is that it's privately owned land and it's not public open space, and it's not really designated recreational land, only that people use it as such. Is that correct?
Councillor Cole, thank you for your question. I'm afraid to say that I don't actually know the ownership of the land, and land ownership is somewhat outside of the realm of planning. However, it's not, as far as I am aware of the planning history, it is not designated public open space.
Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions, Councillor Cole? No.
No, thank you. It was just a clarification as to the status of the land, and I think Mr. Till's answered that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Culver next, and I'll come on to you, Councillor Vickers. I note your message. Councillor
Thank you,
Culver.
Chairman. I've got a few questions, if that's okay, of Mr. Till.
Right.
It says in 6.12 that hedging on the southern boundary has already been removed. Is that correct? And do you know when that happened? Because surely that shouldn't happen until the development begins.
Thank you, Councillor Culver. I'm not aware of what hedging has been removed. What I can say is that any landowner has an ordinary right to carry out works to remove such vegetation as they please. If that vegetation would have been removed in contravention of any regulations such as the hedgerow regulations, that would fall outside of the proper remit of planning. There's no specific protection under planning for hedges. So we frequently see the situation where it might be preferable for certain vegetation to be retained prior to a planning application being submitted, but that there is no protection against that vegetation being removed.
Okay, thank you. What is your view or your understanding of who will manage the attenuation ponds in the future? So it's been suggested it might have to be a private management company or the council. Do you have any more information you can give us about that?
I have more information in respect of the details of the sustainable drainage condition, and that Part G of that condition requires the inclusion of a management and maintenance plan for the lifetime of the development. This plan shall incorporate arrangements and agreements for adoption by an appropriate public body or statutory undertaker, management and maintenance by a residence management company, or other arrangements to secure the operation of the sustainable drainage scheme throughout its lifetime. That condition is worded in a standard manner that secures the delivery and retention of the sustainable drainage measures to the council's satisfaction. We won't discharge that condition unless we know who the management of those measures is transferring to.
Okay, and is it the case that if there wasn't a private management company that West Berks would automatically take on the management of that?
I couldn't advise you on that. I believe that there is the option, in fact, there is the option within this condition for a statutory undertaker to take it on. So that doesn't necessarily indicate a management company. It could be a body such as Thames Water, for example, or anyone else specialising in the management of these drainage measures.
Okay. And just finally, Mr. Till, in your view, should we be taking notice of what the village design statement says? Because I know in previous applications we have done so, and there are points in there saying that there should be sympathetic infilling within the settlement boundary, for example, and housing development should be in small groups. Do you have a view about whether we should be taking notice of that document?
I think it's very important to bear in mind that the Cold Ash Village Design Statement is directed mainly in view of development within the Cold Ash settlement itself. And this application, in terms of its location, yes, in parish terms, it is in Cold Ash, but its character and relationship is actually to development predominantly to the south and adjacent to it. The thrust of officer consideration, therefore, is whether it respects the character of the area, and it would be a nonsense to take a design methodology for development that is located half a mile up the road and alienated from the site and impose it on the site. The Cold Ash Village Design Statement contains some useful guidance in general for development in Cold Ash, and absolutely should be used in consideration of some developments. But first and foremost, it should be considered whether it's sympathetic to the development surrounding it. Second point is that specific measures in terms of clustering of buildings, etc., aren't going to supersede the requirements of a allocation within the housing site allocation DPD. This site is allocated, so while it might not fit with the requirements of the Cold Ash VDS in terms of specific amounts of clustering of buildings, infill, etc., it did fit with the requirements of assessing sites for the housing site allocation DPD. To suggest, as has been said earlier on, that the site isn't suitable for development of 75 houses directly contradicts the allocation that the council has considered and made, and directly contradicts the council's own policy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Calder, for your questions. And now, finally, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 36, under heads of terms for section 106 agreement, it talks about public open space. And in the light of what Councillor Cole asked, I've just been on the online map on my other screen, and this public open space on which the leap is going to be placed, which I think is public open space that section 106 agreement term is talking about, is owned by and maintained by West Berkshire Council, according to the map. And I actually visited the site, and it's quite clear there are 4 different entrances, pedestrian entrances to the site, and there's a car park, which is also highway land. So I can't see there's any doubt that this is West Berkshire Council land. And that leads up to my question is, can we ensure that in the light of the applicant relaying the message from the agent relaying the message from the applicant that they're quite happy to have this path created linking the site via the leap to the Waller Drive, in other words, right across the site, saving height gain, can I be assured that that is capable of being incorporated in that section 106 agreement with the necessary amendment to the plan that is referred to? Because, this won't come back to members, but my vote in this is totally dependent on that path being feasible, because otherwise I don't think this site is, this application is as good as the previous one in highway terms. So can you confirm that that is possible? And I had a linked question to Mr. Goddard to follow.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. You're absolutely correct as far as I'm aware. The land to the south, and I should have recalled this when I was asked the question, is in the ownership of West Berkshire Council and is public open space. It's the land to the north that constitutes the residential part of the site that isn't. But in respect of provision of an access through it, the applicant has offered it. If members wish to vote to have it incorporated in the section 106, then officers can enter into negotiations in order to seek to do that. In the event that it can't be incorporated in the section 106, then members could also resolve that the application should be brought back to committee for consideration again within the timescale that's agreed under the resolution.
That's very helpful, Mr. Till. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Goddard, the TRIPS model, and it's quoted and it's cited as being used, and it talks about how affordable housing, you use a lower number of trips. Does the model take into account the nature of the topography? Because it's clearly assuming a certain modal shift. Assuming that people in affordable housing can't afford cars, so they walk and they bike, poor souls. But that is totally unrealistic if you're looking at a site which by its very nature, it's impossible to construct pedestrian and cycleways in the approaches or even within the site that is anywhere near the Manual for Streets recommended standards. Can't hear you. You can't hear you.
You're muted, Mr. Goddard.
I'm muted. Chairman, I'm assuming that all questions of Mr. Till have been concluded. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, it was for Mr. Goddard, yes.
Of myself. The Trip Route Information Computer System, or TRICS, no, does not take account of topography of site. It takes account of the traffic generation surveys of it on its database from a whole number of sites across the UK and the Republic of Ireland. That's all it does. It doesn't take account of topography.
So there's no possibility of you as an officer who knows the ground in the local area modifying those predictions in the light of the real world, which happens to be not flat.
Well, Chairman, I took the view at the time that while there was some gradient going up to the site, I didn't think the gradient was excessively steep, that it would have that much of an impact. The wording in Manual for Streets is, I can quote it if you bear with me. Just now.
I've got the page on gradient in front of me, actually, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look for it.
Para 6412.
6412.
Sorry, 6411. This is regarding cyclists. Maximum gradient should generally be no more than 3% or 5% maximum over a distance of 100 metres or less. You've got a lot more than 100 metres on Stony Lane of, I would suggest, more than 5%.
Unfortunately, there's another little caveat in that paragraph that says, however, topography may dictate the gradients, particularly if the route is in the carriageway.
Yeah, but that then if you link that to the...
And it's the same with pedestrians. Manual for Streets is not particularly prescriptive, unfortunately. It states for pedestrians, ideally, it should be 1 in 20 times topography may dictate a higher. But as far as your highway officers are concerned, anything more than 1 in 12 or 8% is unacceptable. And as far as this site is concerned, that is met. And while I'm here, I think Councillor Jeff Beck raised a particular good point earlier on regarding condition 11, which talked about gradients of up to 1 in 8 when someone lived there that wasn't mobility impaired. That's quite an old condition, old standard condition that seems to have crept in. So therefore, with your leave, Chairman, I would like to suggest that condition is amended, that it's 1 in 12 throughout, and the 1 in 8 part is struck out.
Well, I'll take advice from Mr. Till on that as well.
Chairman, I think the suggestion made by Mr. Goddard is perfectly sensible in light of the concerns.
Mr. Goddard, you had a question from Councillor Cant earlier on, of which you went away.
I did.
Homework, and I'm sure you've come back with some answers. Thank you.
I have some answers. I did look at the correspondence for the outline planning application, and the Environment and Health Service didn't raise any concerns about air quality at that time. It wasn't something that they addressed. However, I do have some figures for you on traffic generation. Let's take the morning peak, obviously when the children are walking to and from school, and Kiln Road at that time had 1,187 vehicle movements, according to the surveys that were done at the time. And that's both directions added together, east and west. The development would add another 30 vehicle movements, again, that's both directions added up. So that would be an increase of some 2.5%. So therefore, at the time, that's a very small increase in our view. And therefore, this proposal was recommended for approval on that basis. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry, Chair. Can I just be clear that the measurement you quoted the figure that was the Department of Health have indicated was prevailing. Is that under with the current rules? Is that an acceptable level of air pollution, or is that beyond nationally set limits or national prescription?
Chairman, I've just given you figures on the traffic generation. I haven't given you any comments on the air quality. I wouldn't be qualified to do that. But all I can say is that it wasn't an issue that environmental health officers addressed at that time. So I can only assume that they had no concerns.
And you haven't looked at that in the context of the current detailed application. What I'm getting to is, as a committee, I think, Chair, if we don't, we have to move on, I guess, with this. But if we're not going to deal with it at this point, I think perhaps we should reflect on whether we need a better indication of the impact on air quality of some of the developments which are being proposed to us, rather than purely movement volumes.
Thank you. Councillor Cole, back in.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of information with regard to air quality. We currently have 2 air quality management areas in West Berkshire. One is on Thatcham, between Hartshill Road and the Broadway, and the other is on the A339, the roundabout at Greenham, popularly known as the Burger King roundabout. Those are the only 2 air quality management areas in Newbury, in West Berkshire, and our environmental health officers monitor air quality on a regular basis. So if that helps members.
Councillor Barnett.
Mr. Goddard, you mentioned about extra traffic movements on Kiln Road, working on the assumption that obviously extra vehicle movements will be coming down Stony Lane. One of the objectors, of course, also raised this issue of Waller Drive and the way that you would be able to obviously overcome missing out on the traffic calming along Turnpike Road. So had you taken in consideration that some of the movements might be in that direction? And secondly, by widening the section near the site entrance at the upper end of Stony Lane, that would obviously encourage vehicles that are coming from the Cold Ash end to have a nice open clear run down the hill. 30 mile an hour to me seems quite a high maximum for vehicles that could be going along that section, with a lot of people that could be crossing over the Stony Lane or even walking along the side of the road. So add any consideration, perhaps even towards a 20 mile an hour been put on that section.
Chairman, 2 questions there. Firstly, was traffic considered going through Waller Drive and Turnpike Road? Well, yes, it was. Traffic was distributed at the time from travel to work data from the 2011 census, and it was found that 70% of traffic would go via Kiln Road to go towards the B4009, and then some 30% would go via Waller Drive and Turnpike Road. The numbers of increases in traffic via Waller Drive and Turnpike Road were obviously very small, much smaller than what would go via Kiln Road. With regards to speed limits, that's not something that we would normally impose on a development proposal, because to change a speed limit is something that that is undertaken via a separate consultation process. Should there be concerns about traffic speed post development, then that would be an issue that the parish council should take up with the speed limit review at that time. The thing we do that is because with any consultation on a speed limit, there's never any guarantee that it would be supported locally. And therefore, to put a development proposal sort of hinged on that would be unreasonable. It is better to keep it separate. So if there's a speeding issue in the future, it is recommended that the parish council would look for the issue to be considered at any future speed limit review.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Councillor Culver, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, just another question for Mr. Till. I've just noticed, and probably should have noticed this before, under the conditions, number 32 and number 33 are missing. Is that information you're able to share with the councillors before we make a decision this evening?
Yes, Councillor Culver, I think that's a typo. I don't have any list of conditions that fills in those blanks. Respectfully, I would suggest that those conditions didn't exist in the first place and have probably come about as an amendment to a bullet point list.
Well, under 35, it refers to conditions 32 and 33, so that would suggest that they do exist.
Ah, you have a point. Let me just review the condition, Councillor Culver.
Thank you.
Councillor Abs, you have a question. Is it for Mr. Goddard or is it for Mr. Till? Otherwise, we'll take that while Mr. Till's looking up.
Unfortunately, it's for Mr. Goddard, if that's okay.
Yeah, we'll take that question, members.
Fantastic, Chairman. Thank you. Nobody's mentioning traffic going north towards Ashmore Green. It's of concern to me. I've driven up that road quite often. In fact, someone's hit me coming down that road. So I know it's an accident black spot, because even though I was parked on the side, it happens. What level of increase? Because the numbers you mentioned all added up to 100%. So it sounds like nothing's going north, but that can't be true.
Chairman, that's correct. Yes, I rounded them up to the nearest 10. There's actually 3.8% going on Stony Lane to the north, according to the transport assessment that was submitted in 2016. So you're looking at an increase of about 2 cars during the AM and PM peak.
And do you know off the top of your head mean time between crash on that lane, because they will happen quite often?
No, I don't, I'm afraid. All I do know is that the transport assessment that was submitted at the time did view would have viewed the accident record on all the roads in the vicinity to see if there was any patterns. If my memory serves me correct, that there was no pattern of concern that was sufficient to warrant refusal of the development.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Garland.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Abs. Mr. Till, how are we doing? You're muted. Mr. Till, you're muted.
Sorry, Chairman. My apologies. It appears that the conditions referred to have been removed at some point due to a typo. I believe that they should be within the ecology officer's consultation response. Simply to do, as far as I can see, with securing the appropriate recommendations of the ecology reports that were submitted. So I would suggest that in this particular case, members could require that the requirements of the conditions that are set out by the ecologist were reinstated into the decision and delivered. I'm just trying to locate the ecologist's comments on on my electronic system.
Mrs. Mayor, I'm going to call you in here and just ask your advice that members are missing a couple of conditions here, and I'm just concerned.
Can I just ask whether they're actually missing? I mean, the other possibility here is that actually 32 and 33 should be 31 and 34. Simon, you would know better than me on this because I don't have the fact, but that I'm wondering if something's been taken out and the numbers in condition 35 are referenced wrongly rather than them missing. I don't know whether you considered that, but that occurred to me.
I'll just reread that condition again, Chairman.
Because condition 3 is the plan. Condition 32 and 3 shall be reviewed, but
31, so 31 we have landscape ecological management plan, and 34 is talking about construction environmental management plan. I think that you're correct, Mrs. Mayor. I think
it's possibly correct. The thing is, it's to establish bats and slowworms. I'm wondering, is it possible? Is it possible to quickly find the conditions on that with the outline?
I'm attempting to find the documentation as we speak.
If not, are we able to move on while we're doing that, and then come back to it once we've got clarification on that point?
Chairman, I think that might be helpful if I can review the outline permission and the ecologist comments while matters move on, if that's possible.
Yep, I can move on. My concern was, and my question to Mrs. Mayor is with regard to should these be missing, and as Councillor Culver's question, in the legal situation of making a decision, are we leaving ourselves at all open to any objection?
Yes, it does, but it depends on whether they're missing or whether they're just numbered incorrectly. So I think we need to establish that before we...
And that is my question as to whether the relevance of taking the debate forward with, one might ask, not all the information, albeit it might be two aspects which we don't actually address in the debate. I asked your advice. Otherwise, you know where we're going with this at a very late stage.
Yes. Well, I mean, we'd have to know. We have to know really whether the what the conditions are.
That is entirely my point.
Well, it depends, Simon. How long do you think it might take you to do this? Do we want to have a comfort break at this point and then come back to the debate after?
I think if I had 5 minutes to work with, I can quite possibly extrapolate where the conditions might have gone missing.
Thank you. Members, I think we're all in agreement this is an appropriate time maybe for two reasons. One, a comfort break, and two, to see if we can establish whether these are an omission or in fact it's a typographical error. Thank you, Councillor Culver, for bringing this to the committee's attention. Mr. Shard, if you could adjourn the meeting as 10:40. 10 minutes, Mr. Till, not to put you under too much pressure.
That would be fine, Chairman. I hope to have an answer for the committee when we return.
Okay, then for 10 minutes, Mr. Shard, if you
10 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Take a break.
Chairman, it looks to me like the majority, or if not all members, have rejoined. Are you ready to reconvene?
I am, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Welcome back, members. Are we all assembled? Mr. Till to come back with us.
Stephen, my video is disabled. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Mayor, can you confirm we're all here, please? I can't see you at the moment.
You can't see me. I'm here. I'm on screen. I do.
Thank you. Right.
Yep, I do appear to be
Can you
here.
just do a quick roll call before we start, please? You might have a named vote list. I think we're all here.
I'm counting 9 members, committee members, Chairman, on my screen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Till, you've had, and we've got Mrs. Legg back. Well, Mr. Till, you've had some time, and I think you've got some information for us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I apologise for the confusion. There is a typo in the report. That's absolutely correct. The conditions referred to are condition 3, 32 and 33, whereas actually condition 32 should refer to 31, the landscape and ecological management plan, and condition 33 is referring to condition 34, the construction environmental management plan. Condition 3 details the requirements of the preliminary bat roost assessment, the dusk emergence and dawn re-entry bat surveys, the phase 1 and 2 environmental and geotechnical investigation, the preliminary ecological appraisal, the reptile mitigation strategy, the reptile survey, the site waste management plan, the preliminary arboricultural assessments, and the landscape management and maintenance plan, which all tie into the requirements for ecological management that are set out in condition 35. So it is simply a misnumbering error that refers to conditions 3, 31 and 34 as set out in your agenda, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. I'll come back to Councillor Culver. Councillor Culver, are you happy with that response?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Till. The only thing I would say on that is under condition number 3, where it talks about the bats under 55 and 56, it talks about things that have already happened. So it doesn't actually talk about conditions for the future that need to be conducted before building begins.
Councillor Culver, those surveys contain recommendations in respect of how matters will be addressed as well. as the survey data themselves. And the intention of the condition is to ensure that the recommendations of all ecological surveys are delivered on.
Thank you. Any more comments, Councillor Cole? We're quite happy. Members, if I could just focus your mind back now on the application we're on. This is the Coley Farm, Stony Lane, Ashmore Green application. This is for the erection of 75 houses with associated access, parking, internal roads, drainage, landscaping, children's play space, and other associated structures. This is the application we're looking for. We've had the questions and answers, and now I'd like it to open this up for debate. And straight in, I have Councillor Abbs. Councillor Abbs, you're away, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. With quite a lot of these, but we see it again. We have lots of information that comes towards us, and then we have lots of information that is clearly incorrect. So we're being asked to make decisions, and officers were asked to make decisions on things that were in proposals from the builders that were incorrect. In those circumstances, I find it extremely difficult to support an application until such facts like distances, etc., are in fact correct. Because if the numbers aren't right, how can we draw the right conclusion? So that's my main issue with this, is not the fact that it will sustain some houses. It's not the fact that it's a bit hilly and so on. All of those could be mitigated and so on and so forth. It's the fact that we just don't have the correct information in front of us. And even with the information we have got in front of us, we still see some of our policies that we're saying, well, it's okay in this case, but we still have a clear policy that we're going to breach, and I don't like that. We either have them and we follow them, or we shouldn't be following them at all. So all in all, I'm not going to make a proposal to reject this, but I would be asking for conditions if we were minded to approve, to do with appearance, layout, and scale. Which are the three areas that are of greatest concern to me. But I'm not happy that yet another proposal is in front of us, and we've spent half the time debating, is the information correct or incorrect that's been presented by apparently two officers and now to the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. My only comment, Councillor Abbs, is that normally one would listen to a bit more of the debate because we do have we don't come in with a determined overview or decision of an application until we've heard everybody's discussion. But the proposal is on the.
No, sorry, I specifically said I'm not making a proposal. I'm willing to listen to the rest of the debate for sure, Chairman.
I'm sorry, I thought you said you proposed.
No, I would not be proposing to. I was not proposing.
Thank you. That's why I asked for some clarification there. Right, we'll move on. Councillor Wollaston.
It seems to me we need to be pragmatic. We have an excellent planning consent. We know that if we don't pass this one, then it's going to have what is regarded generally, I think, as an inferior scheme, have a subsequent detailed planning application. So the other alternative is we refuse it, and we'll probably lose on appeal. I think we have no option. We might, if we were starting from fresh, we might have taken a different view. But I propose that we support officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I could not support this application as it stands because unless we get this footpath reinstated crossing the public open space, I don't think it is as good in terms of access as the previous one, and I'd be happy to see it voted down. But with the addition of the wording that was mentioned in by Mr. Till in the section 106, and on condition that if negotiations do not successfully conclude, and I would hope they would, judging by what the applicant's agent told us, I would not support the application by Councillor Wollaston. I would also draw your attention, members, to the last plan in our pack. Unfortunately, they're not page numbers, but before we get to the Rickety Gate Farm plans, there's a plan called Play Area Layout. And I would like to see the entrance to the play area more appropriately placed so that residents of the existing Manor Park estate can access it without going all the way around either by the road. I mean, if we're going to have this path leading from Waller Drive, then children with their parents can walk to this new play area, which shouldn't belong to the developer. He can build it, but he's building it for the community as a whole. For the benefit of social cohesion, the residents of this new estate should be allowed to mingle, post-COVID of course, with the residents of the existing Manor Park. This public space is devoid of any play equipment at the moment, not very well used. I spent half an hour there earlier in the week. So subject to that clause in the Section 1 agreement being successfully negotiated, only subject to that, if members agree to that being included, I would be happy to second the recommendation. Although I think this is the very worst site in the Newbury settlement area in the whole site allocations DPD, and I would never have voted for it. And I hope Councillor Cole realises that it seems that the large part of the blame for having this meeting here tonight is that she used her casting vote just to pass this one through at the previous occasion. Otherwise, you would be wanting to refuse this. But there we go. We are where we are, and pragmatically.
Please don't speak over the chairman. It's the chairman's prerogative to cast her vote as she wishes to vote on an application. And should it be a casting vote, then that is the democratic system of this.
Oh, absolutely. But it's yes. I'm not accusing her of making a wrong decision. She took that judgment at the time.
Don't single out individual members of the committee for what's gone on when you weren't there. I appreciate that.
Okay, Chairman.
Thank you.
I think I've said all I need to say at the time. Let the debate continue, Chairman. That's
Councillor Cant.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think probably if I'd been there around about the time this was originally discussed, I would have had more questions to ask. But we are where we are. We have an extant consent. It appears that despite some confusion about the numbers, with some conditions added in, and I think some of the other members of the committee have made sensible suggestions about additional conditions of various types, I'd be happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman, very much. And thank you to Mr. Till for investigating the issue about the numbers earlier. I'm still a little bit concerned just because we have Section 26 of the conditions about breeding birds and Section 27, which go into detail about badgers as well. So the reason I discovered the numbers were missing is because I was looking for specific recommendations about bats. So I'm just wondering, I acknowledge the point you make about 55 and 56 relating to outline bat mitigation strategy and preliminary bat roost assessment. But without that detailed information in here, which you've very helpfully given us about the breeding birds and the badgers, it's very difficult for us to make an assessment about whether the condition relating to bats is sufficient. So that's just one point that I would make. And Chairman, is it an appropriate time to mention two conditions which I would like to see?
No, certainly, and that will be considered by the committee.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I would strongly support making the 10% energy emissions reduction a condition, which I think other members have suggested. And also whether we are able to make a condition regarding the distances between the houses, which Councillor Beck and others have mentioned. I do think we lay ourselves open to criticism in the future if we have such a policy, but then we don't follow it. So if we were able to make a change to the conditions in regard to those three particular plots where the distance would be less than what the policy says, I think that would be good as well. Thank you.
I will take advice at this stage from Mr. Till on the 10% reduction, but equally I think with the distances between houses, the case has been made that there were mitigating circumstances and landscaping had overcome that problem. Mr. Till, I don't like to ask you to intervene in the debate, but if we're going to consider those conditions, can you advise very quickly?
Chairman, I quite agree that officers can word an appropriate condition to seek to secure the 10% reduction energy strategy that's been offered.
Thank you. And with regard to the distance between the houses, not so easy, I think, because the layout is now set for that house at 15 metres.
I think that we've got a layout in front of us for consideration, and that alteration would be substantial, possibly involving the removal of housings from that layout.
So would the committee take that in mind, please? That certainly we'd look at the 10% reduction, but please maybe not consider the distances between those houses as a part of the debate. I move on. Councillor Culver now have, I think Councillor Cant's come in. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't put my hand down. I'll put it down.
Okay. Councillor Abbs, you're back in.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so I am going to make a proposal this time, having listened to more of the debate, and I do think we have grounds on which to reject this application, because my understanding is that we are only here to judge this application, nothing else. So the fact that there is a mild threat that we'll just go back to some other version of it that I haven't seen and therefore can't judge is not appropriate for me to judge this evening. If that were to come forward, we'll judge that on its merits at the time, and it may get approval, may get rejected. One assumes it would come before us. But in this case, we have clear reasons to reject. We have a clear reason on appearance, because it isn't in keeping with the other buildings nearby. There are some, I can't remember exactly what the officer said, lower value, lower quality buildings nearby, and there's some higher quality. But I'm not sure why we would then go, it's okay, that's another low quality development because there's one there already, even though there's a high quality. Surely we're looking to go up, not down, or at least stay neutral. So the nearest houses are of higher quality appearance, and therefore I would reject it on those grounds. Layout, I would reject for the reason we've been talking about, but also because of scale and the 3-story, and it is an inappropriately high. They are flats, yes, but why 3 stories? It's so that they can squeeze to the maximum of 75 dwellings. Well, that's, you know, Sandalford came forward and it was 2,000 originally. It's now 1,500. Just because something has outlined for a number doesn't mean we have to, you know, literally approve it to that number every single time. So add all that together, add to the fact that we are very unclear on some of these numbers. I know some of us call it minor, but when you're 25 to 33% out on a number, it's not a minor difference and might make a material change. So we how can I go, well, okay, pragmatically I'll approve it because, you know, that's what we really need to do. No, we really need to judge this on the merits of the application that's come forward. There are many drawbacks with it still. Would I be in favour of some other plan that came forward? Probably yes, because it's got, you know, it was set aside as an area for development, but not this one. So I propose therefore that we reject it based on the conditions I allowed in what turned out a bit of a speech. So sorry.
Yeah, can I just check? Myself and Jenny were concerned that someone else had already made a proposal, even though the debate continued, and I just want to.
Yeah, I clarified that earlier on, Mr. Mayor. It was in fact Councillor Abbs, and I thought he'd also made a proposal.
No, sorry, not Councillor Abbs. Sorry.
Councillor Cant, I think.
Councillor Wollaston made the proposal.
Oh, Councillor Wollaston, yes.
Oh, he made a proposal. I didn't make that. I didn't write that down. Is that correct, Councillor Wollaston?
It is, Chairman.
Oh, I just thought you said that you were supporting it, not that you proposed.
No, I said I was proposing, following officer's recommendation.
Okay, I do apologise, and thank you very much, Mrs. Mayor.
Mrs. Legg as well.
Okay, so unfortunately, Councillor, as we've already got a proposal on the table, I apologise as a chairman. I misheard. I thought he was just supporting the officer's recommendation, not putting a proposal. Okay, so we'll let the debate, and thank you for that. I'll let the debate continue. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, I support this proposal. I would, before I make any other comments, say that I take grave exception to both Councillor Simpson's and Councillor Vickers' comments regarding my casting vote as chairman of the District Planning Committee in 2017, because I think it questions my integrity, and I think that is uncalled for, and I would like certainly Councillor Vickers to withdraw that remark.
Thank you. I made my comment at the time on that, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. But
may I come back, Chairman, to I'm happy to withdraw my comment.
Councillor Vickers, just now, Councillor Cole hasn't finished.
All right.
Thank you. Much has been made about this site and the DPD. Members who were around in 2012 when we were examining our local plan We were asked by the inspector to look at our housing delivery numbers and our housing supply, which is why we've produced the DPD, and this site at Cold Ash was included. I note the village design statement for Ashmore Green is extremely vague on what is acceptable with regard to development in that particular area. We have to consider the application as it stands, although I'm very supportive of the changes to the conditions which other members have wanted to include. Assumptions are being made with regard to people living in affordable housing that they can't afford cars, and I think that's an extremely wrong assumption. The indication is that people who live in affordable housing are in some way poor and are poor and disenfranchised. That's not true. And I think that's a very unfair remark about this development. And as far as I'm concerned, there is absolutely no issue with the gradient. Coming from Sheffield, where I lived on an extremely steep hill, all inclines in this part of the world are extremely gentle as far as I'm concerned. I think we've had a good debate tonight, and there is nothing that has come out of the debate that indicates to me that we should do anything other than accept officer recommendation. It's quite clear. Thank you, Chairman. And I would second Councillor Wollaston's proposal.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Vickers, I'm going to take this not as part of the debate. Have you something to say?
Well, yes, I'd like to respond to two of the things that Councillor Cole has just said. Firstly, if she took it as impugning her integrity, that was not the intention. I mean, I'm accepting Councillor Simpson's word that she did use her casting vote, and of course she's free to use it whichever way she feels, and her judgment is her judgment. But that seemed to have decided the situation, and is the reason why we are where we are today. Really to refuse it. I mean, that's how I understand it. It was in no way impugning her integrity.
And secondly,
the other point is regarding the way the whole TRICS model works. It actually says in the TRICS model that you assume fewer vehicle journeys for people in affordable housing. And I can't think of any other reason why that assumption should be made in the TRICS model. And that very fact has been used by the applicant in their transport statement that's before us today to justify the lower number of vehicles, as I understand it. I may have misunderstood it, but it was certainly not me that's assuming that people in affordable housing can't afford cars. That, to me, must be the reason why they're assumed to conduct fewer vehicle journeys. Either that or they're assumed to be unemployed, which is not the case. But to me, there is nowhere else this high up in the whole of the Newbury settlement area that is so far from facilities. I criticise Sandalford because it's high up, but at least you've got an entire retail park on the same level. So this is an appalling site to have chosen for housing of this density with affordable housing on. It should have been a much lower density for larger houses with people who can afford at least 2 cars, in my opinion. But there we are. And also, I'm not against there being a DPT. Of course, we needed more sites. That's a ridiculous statement of Mr. Cole to assume I meant that. I'm just saying that this particular site was a wrong one to include in the DPD and should never have been brought forward for this number of houses. And I will not change my views on that, and I think they are shared. But we are where we are, and I will probably be supporting the resolution that's before us.
Thank you. In light of the comment on the people in affordable houses not being able to afford a car, I think you said, was it not you, on their bikes, walking, poor souls. Anyway, we move on. Councillor Cant.
Yes, Chair, I presume you don't want to protract this very much further. We've had a very extensive debate. All I wanted to say was, clearly it's frustrating Councillor Vickers feels it right to rehearse the issues about the site itself. That's irrelevant. The relevant issue is whether we are prepared to accept that the plan with now before us is sufficient. to justify consent, and in my view it is. And I think we should be very careful to challenge the professionalism and the judgment of our planning officers, which has been expressed throughout the report, in the sense of expecting a planning inspector to then reverse that. Because if it goes to appeal and we're not absolutely convinced it's completely wrong, then we are likely, I think, to be rebuffed and incur substantial expense.
Thank you. I'd like to draw this to a conclusion now. I do have Councillor Abbs. Councillor Abbs, is it?
Very minor point. I'd like a named vote.
You're very welcome.
Chairman. I'd like a named vote on this, please, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, I have a proposer, Councillor Wollaston. I have a seconder, Councillor Cole. But before I do, I'd like to ask Mr. Till and Mrs. Mayor that they're quite clear of the conditions that have been raised. And those are from Councillor Vickers with regards to the footpath, subject to the 106 agreement. And also Councillor Vickers, I think, suggested that maybe our consideration of another entrance to the playground so that another estate can, in fact, have access to that playground. They were the two issues I've got noted. Any other conditions? Councillor Culver, please.
Thank you. The 10% for the emissions reduction, Chairman.
Yep, that's right. Thank you. We're not going to consider the distancing. Councillor Abbs.
Yes, I'd like to see support of the 2-metre cycling potential that was mentioned during presentations, please.
Thank you. We'll note that. And
condition 11, I think it was agreed that at the time everybody agreed that we would be changing that to 1 in 12 from.
Thank you. That was 1 in 12 as well. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mrs. Mayor and Mr. Goddard. Now, have I captured all of our conditions? I think I have, as I noted them with Mrs. Mayor's help and Mr. Goddard's help, and a reminder from the other councillors. So I'm going to now put this to the vote as a proposer, Councillor Wollaston, seconded by Councillor Cole, and the recommendation is for Head of Planning and Countryside be authorised to grant planning permission for this application, which is 20/00604. This is a full planning application at Coley Farm. This is the erection of 75 houses, etc., etc. Mrs. Mayor, would you please carry out the name vote, please?
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
Against.
Councillor Barnett. Sorry, you're muted, Councillor Barnett.
Oh, apologies, against the proposal.
Councillor Bennyworth.
Or reluctantly for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Cant.
With the conditions imposed for.
Yeah. Councillor Cole.
For.
Councillor Culver.
Against.
Councillor Vickers.
For, but with those conditions.
Councillor Wollaston.
For with the conditions.
And Chair.
I'm for.
Okay. That's carried 6-3.
Thank you very much. That application is approved with those conditions as discussed. Members, thank you very much for that contribution and that resolution of that application this evening. We now move on to the second application this evening. This is for Rickety Gate Farm at Hampstead Marshall. This has come to committee due to a ward member's call-in, and it's Mrs. Cutts who's going to do the presentation this evening. Over to you, Mrs. Cutts.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a Section 73 application, which is seeking to vary a condition of the previously granted permission on the site for the relocation of a dog breeding establishment, which involved the erection of a single-storey kennel building, isolation kennel building, change of use of barn to ancillary storage, as you can see on the site, the use of land as a canine exercising area, and the siting of a log cabin and associated parking and landscaping. Permission was granted following an appeal in 2013, and following discharge of conditions, the work commenced on site in 2016, with the kennel building being constructed and the isolation kennel partly constructed. As you can see, this is a visualisation for the log cabin as well. This is an extant permission as it has been implemented. The foundations have been laid for the log cabin, although it hasn't been erected on site. The 2013 permission granted temporary occupation of the log cabin for a worker on the site for a period of 3 years from the date of the permission. In 2017, a variation to that condition was sought for a further period of 3 years. That was subsequently granted in October 2017. So this application is seeking to vary condition 13 of that permission. And it is seeking a further extension for a period of 3 years from the date of first occupation of the log cabin, or when it ceases to be occupied, whichever is the soonest. So here you can see the access to the site from Gore End Road. This land you see on the screen would be the exercise area. There has been some spoil deposited on the site. However, this can be restored as part of the existing landscaping conditions. Objections were received from Hampstead Marshall Parish Council due to the buildings being a visual intrusion on the AONB, noise pollution, and sought clarification about the materials on the site. As you can see on the screen now, that's the kennel building which has been constructed. There were no objections from statutory consultees, and one objection was received from the other statutory consultees other than the parish council. One objection was received from a neighbour on the grounds of the current appearance of the site and that it does not respect the AONB location. As I previously mentioned, there is an extant planning permission on the site for the whole dog breeding facility. And whilst the buildings have been...
Mrs. Katz. Thank you.
Whilst, yes, so as I mentioned, there is on
your emails are up again.
I don't know. That's not mine.
Simon Tills.
Simon's.
Simon's.
There we go.
Very good. Sorry, Sean.
That's all right. Okay, so at the moment you can see the isolation kennel. The log cabin would be sited to the left of that, as you can see it. So there is an extant permission on the site for the dog breeding facility. As you can see, they've been constructed but not brought into use. So the decision tonight focuses on the occupation of the log cabin for a worker for the kennels, and it's seeking to extend that permission on the site for a further 3-year period from the date. The applicant is seeking for it for the date of first occupation rather than 3 years from the date of the permission. So it's policy C5 of the housing site allocation DPD, which sets out the criteria for rural worker housing. During the course of the application, updated financial and business information was submitted, which has demonstrated that the delays in building out the scheme and occupying it have been for a combination of financial and personal reasons, as well as changes to the licensing regulations, which were introduced in 2018. And then there have been further delays this year caused by COVID-19 and the inability which has just made it a little bit harder to export dogs. As demonstrated in the body of the officer report, it is concluded that on balance, the ongoing financial and functional tests as required by policy C5 have been met. The timings for the completion of the development have been set out in the application, with the construction of the remainder of the site taking place between January and May 2021, with the erection of the log cabin starting in June 2021, with occupation in September 2021. Whilst the applicant is seeking a further 3-year period for the occupation of the dwelling from first occupation, rather than the date of the consent, it's considered that there may be circumstances which could result in a further delay. And given the extant permission on the site, this could result in an indeterminate period of time for the log cabin to be first occupied. And so it is recommended that to allow for some flexibility for the business, to enable them to actually finish building out the site and to get the log cabin erected on the site, and to ensure that we still have control without an open-ended permission, it is recommended that the wording of the condition is as indicated in the report, and I'll read to you now. The temporary log cabin hereby permitted shall be removed and the land restored to its former condition on or before 3 years from the date of first occupation, or the 30th of September 2024, or when it ceases to be occupied, whichever is sooner. The local planning authority shall be notified in writing within a month of the date of first occupation. Details to restore the land shall be submitted to and agreed in writing by the planning authority before the works are implemented. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Cutts. I'm going to move on quickly now to Mrs. Legg. Mrs. Legg, could we come to the, just wait for the screen to clear. Just when you're ready, sir. Thank you. Move on to the 500-word submissions. We have no submission from the council. We have no submissions from objectors, no supporters, but we do have one from the agent. Mrs. Legg, please.
Yes, Chairman. So this is for the agent. Planning permission was granted on appeal in 2014 for the relocation of a dog breeding facility to the application site. The permission included the erection of a number of buildings and structures for the dog breeding business. It also allowed the erection of a temporary mobile home for 3 years. The consent was renewed in 2017 to give a further 3 years for the log cabin on site. The building of the new dog breeding facility has commenced, but the log cabin has not yet been built. The log cabin is not required until the dog breeding use commences, and as such, it will be the last building to be erected and occupied. Due to the numerous reasons related to the existing business, licensing changes, refinancing, and the applicant, Miss Paul's personal life, the new breeding facility has yet to be completed. COVID-19 has also had an impact on the business due to the inability to sell dogs abroad. However, work continues on site, and it is hoped that the works can be completed by May 2021 and move the established dog breeding business to the new site and erect the log cabin in June 2021 with the occupation by September 2021. The relevant guidance for breeding dogs is set out in the Animal Welfare Licensing of Activities Involving Animals England Regulations 2018 Guidance, Notes for Conditions for Breeding Dogs, April 2020, published by the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Miss Rachel Paul is seeking to achieve the higher standard and such is proposing to provide a log cabin on site to meet the requirement of a competent person must be on site at all times, as set out in the higher standard sections of the document on page 36. The higher standard of a competent person being on site at all times is set out at section 10.4 emergencies. Breeding bitches can have any number of complications from early on in the pregnancy to the critical delivery window and the rearing of pups. During the week prior to the expected delivery day, the bitch needs to be monitored very frequently, several times every hour. The proposed log cabin complies with policy C5 of the Housing Site Allocations DPD 2006 to 2026, as it is for a 3-year period. As the cabin is not on site yet, it seems unreasonable for the 3 years to start from the date of the grant of permission, that the 3 years should start from the first occupation of the cabin. The proposed wording by the officer is acceptable to the applicant. Please help this local businesswoman by granting plan permission so that she can get the site built out and occupied with a successful dog breeding facility. Without the log cabin, the enterprise cannot operate to the desired standard. With thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Legg. Mrs. Legg, can you give me some indication if Nikki Brock is a Mrs. or a Mr.?
I don't know, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, any questions of the agent? We do. Councillor Abbs. Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Mr. Shah, could you invite in, please, Nikki Clark, and then it will be clear to us.
Nikki is with us, so we can't see he or she yet.
No, and Nikki Brock, good evening. We can... There, we can see you now. Yeah, you just put the light on. Well done. Welcome to the meeting. We do have a question for you. It's from Councillor Abbs with regarding this application at this location. Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Ms. Brooks. A very quick one, actually. In the statement, it mentions the inability to export as the reason for delay, but there's lots and lots of reports about shortages of dog supply in the UK. So could you square that off for me as to how important export is in this particular? And secondly, you're going for 3 years, but one assumes you've got a 5-year business plan and beyond. So I understand why you're going for such a short period if it's a permanent business.
Thank you. I'll deal with the second question first. The local plan policy only allows for 3 years, so from the outset, 3 years was sought.
My lack of knowledge here. Thank you.
In terms of export, I can't give you the breakdown of the amount of dogs sold out of the country and retained in the country, but I'm aware that there are some dogs exported, and that's been a problem this year. Yeah, so I can't give you the numbers of how many are sold out of the country.
But it is a critical part of your business plan, exporting dogs.
It's a critical part of Miss Paul's business plan, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's not the sole part of it. She breeds a lot of dogs.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cole, well done.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just a purely curious question. What breed of dogs are bred on this site?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. It's not really relevant to the application I've submitted, but I believe it's a broad range of different dogs.
A broad range of different dogs?
I believe so. But it's not, as I say, it's not really relevant to the planning application, so it's not something I
Councillor Cole knows that.
to find out.
I'm aware of that, but it was just curiosity. But if it's a range of dogs, then I'm a little more curious. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I think we've done. Well done, Ms. Brock. Thank you very much for your contribution tonight. And Mr. Shard will kindly escort you back into the waiting room. Thank you. We now move on to our ward members. This evening, we have Councillor Cole. If you could invite Councillor Cole in with us, please, Mr. Shard. I'm looking. Can I see him yet? No, here he comes. Well done. Good evening, Councillor Cole. Welcome to the Western Area Planning Committee meeting. You know the format, sir. 5 minutes, should you require it. I'll give you notification at 4 and then 10 seconds to conclude. When you're ready, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for once, you shouldn't need the timer.
Let's see.
It is unfortunate this application's arrived at this committee. It shouldn't have had to do so. Members, you've all seen the email correspondence that ensued. In practical terms, I call this in, as the call-in form says, as a protective call-in. I referred to issues including the spreading of spoil. As far as the spreading of spoil was concerned, it became clear after a local site visit that we could not do anything about this at this stage. So that element was simply out of it. I did follow up twice. I did not get a response beyond that the planning officer had to talk to the previous section head. The next I heard was that this application was headed for this committee. On reading the report to the committee, I found that the planning officer had actually dealt with the other real issue to my satisfaction, and on inquiry to the satisfaction of the parish council as well. So I withdrew my call-in, only to be told there was nothing in the constitution to permit this to be withdrawn from committee. I cannot put an acceptable planning issue in front of you to justify refusal. This application should therefore go through, as far as I'm concerned. On the other side of this, while it's not entirely straightforward to deal with, I will, however, propose to the Constitution Review Task Group I'm part of, that we look for an acceptable form of words to avoid this situation in future. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any questions of Councillor Cole's presentation to the committee? No, we don't. Councillor Cole, thank you very much. Mr. Sharp, if you'd escort the call back to the waiting room. Thank you. Members, we now come on any questions of clarification of Mrs. Cutt's presentation on this application. No hands, no blue hands. Right, we'll then move on. No questions of Mrs. Cutt's. I open it up to debate. Who would like to start the debate on this application? Councillor Cole, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say I'm a little concerned about the size of this breeding establishment and the type of dogs that will be bred for export, because the agent seemed to think that there was a high number and it would be various breeds. But I'm pleased or reassured to see that the applicant is seeking to seek a high standard of operation of this site, because the new dog kennels legislation requires it. We are where we are. The site is already there. It's a variation of condition, so I will propose that we accept officer recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
Happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor. I have no more anyone wishing to debate. Therefore, there were no conditions considered. I'm prepared now to put this to the vote. Mrs. Mayor, quite happy for me to go forward. Any observations? No. And Mrs. Cutt, you're quite happy. Thank you. And I'll put it to the vote. And the recommendation is that Head of Planning and Countryside be authorised to grant this planning permission at Rickety Gate Farm. Mrs. Mayor, would you conduct the name vote, please?
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
For.
Councillor Barnett.
For.
Councillor Bennyworth.
For.
Councillor Cant.
For.
Councillor Cole.
For.
Councillor Coulter.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Wollaston.
For.
And Chair.
For.
Carried. All in favour.
Thank you. Then application is approved. I'm now going to move on to the third application before the committee this evening. This is White Cottage, North East at Cheveley. This is construction of an oak frame tractor and garden machinery building, construction of a stable block, and the construction of an all-weather riding area. This has come to committee due to a member's call-in and 10 letters of objection. Mrs. Cutts, would you like to prepare this, present this application to the committee, please?
Chairman, could I just draw your attention to the fact that it is 20 minutes to 10. I don't know whether this application will take more than 20 minutes.
Well, I was going to put that a little later. We have a consideration here, members, that as we broach 10 o'clock, I'll ask again Mrs. Cutts as to whether she thinks this can be resolved by 10:30, and then whether or not the members are prepared to sit. If we think, Mrs. Cutts, that there's more to this application than meets the eye in the first instance, and Councillor Cole, who's brought this to the committee, I will take a vote on it, whether we defer this to another meeting or we go forward with it.
I think we can probably conclude it by 10:30. It might be pushing it to get it done by 10 o'clock, but certainly by 10:30, I think we can deal with the issues in that time. I just want to clarify something you just said. This is just a call-in by the ward member. It's not 10 letters of objection on this one.
Oh, thank you. No letters of objection. Okay. Mrs. Mayor, are you happy with that approach?
Yes, absolutely.
And what's the situation if we don't? It'll have to be deferred anyway, be part heard?
Yes.
Just to focus the mind. Thank you. Members, I'll put this to the vote. Are we happy to sit after 10 o'clock? All those in favour, just raise your hand. Councillor Culver? You're not prepared to sit after 10 o'clock?
Does it have to be a unanimous decision, Chairman?
Well, we'll see. I'm just making sure you heard me. In other words, I think everybody else is in favour. Thank you. Then we will continue. Back to you, Mrs. Cutts.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This application is proposing the construction of an oak frame tractor shed and machinery building, which will replace existing buildings on the site, a new stable block for 4 horses, and the construction of an all-weather riding arena on land which is within the ownership and curtilage of White Cottage, which is the U-shaped house you can see on the location plan there. White Cottage forms one of a group of houses known as White Heath, which is in the open countryside and in the North Wessex Downs AONB to the west of Cheveley. The north and west boundaries of the site, as confirmed on the update sheet, are separated from the surrounding agricultural fields to the north and to the north and east by mature trees. The southern boundary is a mix of fences, trees and hedges, and there is a garden hedge along the site boundary with Bee Cottage. The land is currently used for domestic purposes, tennis courts, as you can see on the block plan, and here you can see the location for the riding arena, the stables and the tractor machinery store on the site of the existing outbuilding. The written representations, which will be read out in due course from a neighbour, have queried the measurements included in the officer report about the distances from the neighbouring property. There is a slide which Simon will show in just a moment, which shows the dimensions from the boundary closest to the house, which have been measured as 35 metres to the stable and 52 metres to the riding arena. The site was visited yesterday and the distance to the kink in the fence as shown on the plan was measured as 30 metres. And we are satisfied that following the site visit that there are only minor discrepancies between the plans submitted on the Ordnance Survey base and the council's interactive map and what was measured on the ground. And we are satisfied that the application can be determined on the basis of the submitted plans. This application was submitted following the refusal of planning permission in September for the change of use of land to equestrian use, which was to the east of the existing site, with a riding arena located within that land and the stable and machinery store in the existing positions. That application was refused due to the harm that would be caused to the character and appearance of the area within the North Wessex Downs AONB due to the open appearance and prominent position within the downland landscape. It is clear that this application for the stables and the riding arena and the machinery store are for the personal use of the occupants of White Cottage. These are the outbuildings which were demolished and replaced by the machinery store. No objections have been received from statutory consultees or the parish councils. The highways officers have confirmed that if there were a commercial element to the application, they would require further information, as they have only assessed the proposal on the basis that it is for the personal use of the occupiers of White Cottage. One objection has been received from a neighbour, as set out in the report, due to the impacts on their home and garden due to noise, smell, lighting, the size of the arena, lack of information about lighting, and concerns about potential use of sound systems in the arena. And as you will see on the update sheet, there has now been one letter in support of the application. The main issues in this case are the impact on the character and appearance of the AONB and the impact on neighbouring amenity. The previous application was refused due to the impact on the AONB, as was proposing a change of use of adjacent land with the addition of the riding arena on land which is currently open farmland. The creation of the riding arena within this site, which is enclosed, will have a minimal impact on the surrounding countryside. This is due to the character of the land within the application site, which is residential in nature, and due to the trees around the site, is viewed as part of the group of houses in White Heath within the wider landscape, which is characterised as wooded downland. The trees will filter the views of the structures, and there will not be a significant change in the character and appearance of the site when viewed alongside the existing houses. There was an objection raised about lighting in terms of the residential amenity and also the impact on the countryside. No lighting details have been submitted with the application. However, condition 5 requires that details of any external lighting are submitted for approval. This will ensure that lighting is controlled to only essential elements, and the light spill can be controlled in the interest of maintaining dark skies and to prevent intrusion, visual intrusion to Bee Cottage or Smith's Cottage. The second issue in this application is the impact on residential amenity. There are 2 dwellings adjacent to the site, with Bee Cottage being the closest. The machinery store building will replace the existing buildings on the site, which are along the boundary with Bee Cottage. The main concern, however, is the introduction of the stable and the riding arena. It is acknowledged that there will be some increase in noise due to the result of the additional activity on the site. However, given the separation distances as have been outlined, it is considered that this will be minimal, and there have been no objections raised by environmental health officers. The buildings and arena are for the private use of the occupants of White Cottage, and a condition is proposed to ensure there will be no commercial use of the site. A condition has also been proposed and amended within the update sheet for the details of the location and storage of the manure on the site to be approved. The prevailing winds are in a southwesterly direction, and the adjoining houses are to the northwest. Whilst reference has been made to the potential noise from a sound system on the riding arena, it's considered that this may be difficult to enforce, and it would also potentially be the subject of statutory noise nuisance legislation. It is your office's opinion that this application accords with the relevant development plan policies and with the imposition of the conditions set out in the report and the update sheet. This application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Cutts. We now move on to the public submissions. Mrs. Legg, we have no submission from the Parish Council on this one, but we do have one from an objector. I think this is Mrs. Claire Bassett. Just for the members' information, should you wish to ask questions, Mrs. Bassett, in fact, cannot attend the meeting this evening, so I'll ask Mrs. Legg to read out that submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for hearing our concerns. We would like to start by highlighting inaccuracies in this application and Planning Office report where it relies on the location plan drawing. This drawing is inaccurate and not to the scale prescribed. It underrepresents the distance of the proposed development from our boundary and is therefore very misleading. This is important as the Planning Officer uses this for the basis of her decision that it does not impact our amenity. 6.8, the proposed stables are approximately 35 metres from the boundary is incorrect. The distance measures 20 metres, nearly 50% less. In para 6.4, the officer says the stables are to be sited close to the machinery store, which is on our boundary, further highlighting this discrepancy. The rest of this paragraph about the impact on our amenity is based on this incorrect measurement and therefore understates the actual impact on our amenity. We are also concerned that environmental health officers may have also been misled if they relied on this. The Planning Officer states the arena is 52 metres from our boundary, which is incorrect. This is more accurately measured at approximately 40 metres. Other inaccuracies in the report include 6.4, riding arena within the area of land enclosed by mature hedges. This is incorrect. It is in the field outside these hedges. Largely screened by established planting is not accurate. It will be open onto a field on 2 sides and visible at all times from our home. We also wish to clarify that the replacement of buildings is only for the machinery store. The whole stable complex will be new additional buildings. The proposal is excessive for what is needed and contradicts the principles of development. In particular, it doesn't meet identified needs and maintaining strong local economy statement relied on, and as it is for domestic use, it expressly does not provide a diversification opportunities. The plans do away with the previous small stables, inaccurately described as redundant garden buildings, and replaces them with a large equestrian facility. This will impact our amenity and the character and appearance of the area. We believe it will be unacceptable if it appears to urbanise an attractive area or spoil a key view. That this will just impact our home rather than several, as with the previous application, is not a reason to disregard the guidance. If regrettably consent is granted in line with the principles of development, the arena should be limited to 40 metres in length, the normal size of a domestic arena, and not cross beyond the fence line, reducing the impact on the lighting strategy or planning consent should expressly prohibit the use of floodlights in the area in line with the dark skies policy. What is being proposed here is a large equestrian complex of an arena, stables and yard very close to our home. We object to this because of the intrusion it will have on our ability to quietly enjoy our home in this beautiful area of outstanding natural beauty.
Thank you, Mrs. Legg. There we are. We have no submission of support. Mrs. Legg, could you read out the submission from the applicant, please? This is Mr. Jonathan Green.
Yes, Chairman, to share my screen. This is from the applicant. We would like to respond to some of the points raised by a concerned neighbour regarding the impact on their lives as noted in the Planning Officer's report. As a background to the application, we feel it is important to note that our horses have been living out in the fields to the west of White and Bee cottages for the past 7 years. We have rented these fields prior to purchasing White Cottage earlier this year. All manure has been regularly removed off-site to a local farm during this period. We have received no complaints about noise or smell during this time. The nearest field is approximately 10 metres from Bee Cottage. The council did not object to the barn and stables in the previous application, and these elements have already been considered acceptable. The equine amenities are all for personal use. 6.7 states that there have been concerns raised by residents. There has only been one letter of opposition by a resident. The only other neighbouring property have not objected. Section 6.8 concerns noise from the stables and arena. Our horses live out for the majority of the year, except during inclement weather, and so will rarely be kept in the stables. All 4 loose boxes have been purposely positioned to face away from neighbouring properties, with only store areas facing towards them. As the wind is usually southwesterly, any noise will be carried away from the neighbours. We have no intention of putting a sound system on the arena. Section 6.9 concerns lighting. There will be no lighting on the arena. Lighting in the stables and barn will not be excessive, but adequate for the security and safety of the horses and ourselves. Lights will either face away from neighbouring properties or be shielded and screened off by buildings. For instance, we have proposed a lined extended canopy on the stables so that downlighters can be installed. By definition, these will face down and will not shine into any neighbouring property. In the barn, lights will be directed to the ceiling to give ambient lighting. The barn faces away from Bee Cottage, and so any light will not impact that property. 6.11 concerns smell. As already stated, the horses live out the majority of the time. Manure will be removed to either compost bins or a dung heap to the southeast of our land, well over 100 metres from neighbours. Again, with the prevailing southwesterly wind, there will be no impact on them. The manure will be removed as necessary to Woodsbine Farm, Woodsbine, which we've been doing for the past 7 years. We hope this reassures and allays any fears the proposed development will not impact negatively on our neighbours.
Thank you, Mrs. Legg. Members, do we have any questions of Mr. Green's submission? We do. Mr. Shard, if you'd kindly invite Mr. Green in, who's the applicant. Good evening, Mr. Green. If you'd like to turn on your video and unmute yourself, we'll welcome you properly. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the committee meeting.
Thank you.
And thank you for your presentation. I have one question from Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Green. My question is, did you consult and show the plans for the your proposal to your neighbours?
Yes, we did, I believe. Yes.
You only believe you did?
Well, it's several months ago. It's about 4, 5, 6 months ago that we put in the original application.
Okay, thank you.
And we've all...
Thank you.
Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. The only real issue I have, I think, is over light pollution. Would you accept the condition that there will be no floodlighting over the arena?
Definitely not. We don't want floodlighting on the arena.
No, you'd accept that as a condition?
Oh, absolutely. We don't want it.
Thank you.
Councillor Bennyworth.
Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Green.
Good evening.
Fully following on from Councillor Wollaston just now, many of these arenas have mirrors. If you were minded to put mirrors alongside the arena, could it be in a way that doesn't reflect on your neighbouring properties?
The arena is situated in a south-northerly direction. The neighbours are to the west, so they would be perpendicular to the neighbours.
If I may, sorry, if a mirror is placed on the northern perimeter of the mirror is placed on the northern perimeter of the arena, it wouldn't have any reflective impact.
It would be side on. It would be side on, and it's likely to be placed on the south because the sun shines through the south, and so the sun would shine directly on the mirrors in the north. Therefore, you wouldn't be able to see.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up.
Thank you, Councillor Bennyworth. Councillor Barnett.
Mr. Green, I'm intrigued by your reference to horses' waste products and storage of manure, and where you're obviously passing it on to benefit somebody else. Was it an initiative of yourselves, or were you requested to actually put that down? Because it just seemed a silly part of the application to me, but that's my personal view.
We were requested to we still, I think it's part of the proposals to put forward where we were going to get rid of the manure.
Okay.
Members, no more questions. Mr. Green, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and thank you very much for the way you answered those questions. Mr.
Thank you,
Sharp,
Chairman.
escort Mr. Green back into the waiting room. Thank you. Members, it's now time for the ward member, and it's Councillor Cole. So, Councillor Cole, your presentation, you'll have 5 minutes. Just bear with me 1 minute while I get myself organised here. And you're away, you'll have 4 minutes, and you know the
5
norm.
minutes, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I've called this into committee because I'm concerned the impact this riding arena and stable block will have on the amenity of the adjacent neighbour and the wider AONB. I have no issue with any resident seeking to improve or make additions to their property, but this should not be done at the expense of their neighbours. North Heath is a small community, and although it's in Winterbourne Parish, it's some considerable distance from Winterbourne Village and is separated from it by the B4494 Wantage Road, so it's more closely aligned with Cheveley Parish and Village. North Heath has no settlement boundary and is in a prominent position on high ground within the AONB and looks across the valley towards Cheveley. The arena and stables are proposed to be sited in the larger area of land within the ownership of White Cottage, but outside the domestic curtilage, on an elevated site which, despite statements to the contrary in the report, is not well or adequately screened. There's a good example of this in one of the photographs looking out of the site towards B Cottage. A statement in policy ADPP1 is referenced in the report, addressing identified needs and maintaining a strong local economy. I'm at a loss to understand what identified need this application addresses and how it will ensure a strong local economy, as the application for the buildings and arena are apparently for personal family use. Policy CS12 is also cited, making reference to diversification opportunities for farmers. But as this property is not a farm, nor the applicant's farmers, I fail to see what relevance this property has to this policy has to this application. What is relevant, however, is the fact that this is a proposal for a large arena set in the North Wessex Downs AONB, which has the highest level of protection in planning terms. Nothing in the officer's report indicates to me that the design respects and enhances the character and appearance of the AONB. Rather to the contrary, as lighting is proposed. The application states that this will be low level, but there is no guarantee that this will be the case, even if it is conditioned. North Heath enjoys the benefit of dark skies, which are a major feature of the AONB, and a key project of the AONB Management Board is to ensure that the dark skies within the AONB are protected, not eroded. As the district is 74% AONB, we have a duty as a planning authority to ensure that this protection of our dark skies is maintained. The other issue mentioned is one of noise. We recently gave the effect of noise pollution a lot of attention and weight when we discussed an application at Compton, and I asked the committee to give the same level of consideration to the issue of noise at this site when debating the application. Horses are noisy, particularly when practicing jumping over fences and knocking them over. This, coupled with shouted instructions from a trainer, will be detrimental to the amenity of the neighbour at Bee Cottage, and I see no noise attenuation measures proposed in this application. In my view, the arena could be better placed within the land available to avoid disturbing the near neighbours, but that would probably be at a cost to the applicants, as their own amenity would be affected. And finally, Chairman, as with many equestrian applications, I note that in the accompanying block plan, the arena is referred to as a ménage, which is French for a household. What they really mean is a manège, which is a school for training horses. And it never ceases to amaze me that horse owners and their agents consistently get this wrong. So therefore, Chairman, I cannot support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Members, any questions of Councillor Cole's presentation? No, no. Thank you very much. Okay, we now move on. Any questions of Mrs. Cutt's presentation? Yes, I do. Councillor Wollaston, thank you.
Was there any discussion with the applicant about reducing the size of the arena?
No, there wasn't.
Thank you. Paul?
And was there any discussion with the applicant about noise attenuation, Mrs. Cutts?
No, there wasn't in this instance.
Thank you. Councillor Cant?
If Mrs. Cutts could just address the issue of the impact on the AONB.
Okay, yeah. If we go back to some photographs of the site, there are large mature trees which form the boundary of the site, particularly on the north and the eastern elevations, where these kind of provide some of the setting for the houses which form North Heath in the elevated position as outlined by Councillor Cole. The arena and the buildings will be low profile structures, well, the buildings below profile. There's a low fence around the arena, and the filtering effect of the screening, together with their kind of viewed as kind of ancillary features to the residential group of dwellings, viewed within that kind of the context of the existing development on the site. So I consider that they're not going to be harmful to that character of, you know, the overall appearance of the country.
Forgive me, could I just have a very short supplementary? Would those considerations, low height and all the other things, be considerations you'd apply to any structure anyone wanted to put up in an AONB, or is it specific to this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, even when you consider things like outbuildings and large garages as part of residential developments, yeah, the way that the whole group of buildings are viewed together, how they sit in the landscape, certainly are material considerations and ways that we would assess the application.
Thank you.
Mr. Vickers?
Yeah, I'm curious as to the reasons for refusing the previous application. Are we talking about a ménage on a slightly different piece of land here? And an associated question is, if I was to acquire a horse, which is unlikely, do I have to get a change of use for my private curtilage to be able to accommodate it, or is it only because it's on an agricultural piece of land that is now being used to accommodate horses, even though they're privately owned horses, because all over the district you see agricultural land with horses being grazed on it. But is that equestrian use, or is that just
yeah, and equestrian use is different to an agricultural use. The previous, I don't know if it's possible for Simon just to show a location plan, just to share his screen for a moment, and hopefully I can describe where the previous application was. That was in the open fields, which are arable fields. So where you can see the tennis court and the eastern boundary of the site, they were proposing to kind of go out on that piece of land there, which is open arable land, and just to put a fence across there, and then the new structure.
What, on the bit that's green,
on the bit that's green rather than yellowy.
I see, right out there.
And there's on that. Yeah, so it was a very different.
And then it would have been exposed completely to views from Cheveley and yeah. I see. So, in your view, this is acceptable on those grounds because it's within the curtilage of the building. So, my second question is, when is putting a horse in one's garden becoming equestrian use, or isn't it?
Well, I think given that they're adding the stables, there is the use comes in with that.
So it's the structures associated with the horse.
Yeah.
There was a stable there before.
Yeah. Right. Well, there were some buildings there. I'm not sure if they were. I think the applicant referred to them as stables. I'm not sure if they were used for horses or not.
Okay.
I don't think they were.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Cutts, there's been some disagreement over distances involved with this. Could you comment on those, please?
Okay, yeah. Simon Till actually visited the site yesterday, as we obviously had sight of the written representations, which obviously showed very different measurements, and we checked our OS plans against the interactive map that we use, and Simon also visited the site so that we could clarify the measurements. There is a plan within the presentation. Simon, it might be, could you show that as well, which shows where the measurements that I took to provide you with the measurements within the report, where I took the distance from the stables and the arena to the actual dwelling house, which shows measurements of 35.5 metres and 52 metres respectively. Simon measured the site to what you can see as the kink in that hedge next to the stables as being about 30 metres. We think from the site visit, it may have been that the neighbour had measured from the garden boundary across to the stables, although that still didn't quite tie up with the measurements that she'd said. But from our checking with the council records and the site visit, we're pretty sure that the measurements we've got on the submitted drawings are pretty much correct. Simon, do you agree with that?
Can I just interject there, because I think there's a slight misunderstanding in terms of the photography that I provided. I used a 30-metre tape measure to measure across the field between the kink in the fence, amongst other fixed reference points, which is adjacent to the location of the stables and the boundary adjacent to Bee Cottage, where Sean took her measurements from. The measurement that I got was significantly over 30 metres, and the plans show 35. I believe I came out at 35 metres, in fact, is what I've confirmed in that location. So to within a 50 centimetre margin of error on a 1 to 1250 plan is actually near as damn it spot on in terms of that scale of plan. In terms of taking a more detailed measurement to locate the stables correctly, then it's quite clear on that plan the distance that the stables would be from the kink in the fence, that's a fixed reference point. But there was quite clearly a misunderstanding in the objector's correspondence where she appeared to have taken her measurements from her garden boundary and Sian's report where the measurement had been taken from directly adjacent to Bee Cottage itself, the objector's house.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I may, please, just a supplementary. Councillor Cole was mentioning dark skies. Could officers just confirm that any lighting would be subject to a separate planning application?
It wouldn't be the subject of a separate application, but it is a condition of this application. So no lighting can be put up without our consent. So yeah, no light. So yes, they need permission for any lighting on the site.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is that me, Chairman?
Yeah, Councillor Wollaston, yes, please.
No, sorry, I didn't hear you. Can I just be clear? If this was just an application for the menage or the arena in isolation, it wouldn't need a consent? So the application is purely for the stable block and the, whatever it's called, tractor area?
No, all three need permission.
Or even the arena would?
Yes, even the arena, given the engineering works required, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Cole back in. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. I was trying to unmute. I don't want to prolong this too much, but I think it's unfortunate that I don't think the residents have been sufficiently consulted with regard to this application. Once again, we're confronted with an application where measurements are called into.
Is the question Mrs. Katz?
No, sorry, it isn't. I'm sorry.
No. Right, no more questions. Right, I will now open up to debate. My only observation is if I put 4 coats down, and I had that field, and I pretended I had a menage, and I jumped over poles, and I went round and round on the grass, I wouldn't need planning permission. So I'm just wondering where the argument of the noise goes, but I'll leave it at that.
It's something we'd love to see, Chairman.
Thank you. Debate, councillors. Who would like to start? Councillor Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As I said, I think it's unfortunate that the applicant hasn't really adequately consulted with the residents. Once again, measurements have been called into question. Nothing, Mrs. Cutt says no discussion with regard to noise attenuation has been had with the applicant, and I think it's really quite important because horses are noisy when they are practicing in an arena. It's different to horses being turned out into a field. There is a lot of activity and noise in arenas when horses are practicing, particularly when it's show jumping. Councillor Wollaston's, or was it Councillor Bennyworth's comments about mirrors in around the arena are really quite disturbing because irrespective of how they're placed, they will cause reflection in this sensitive area of the AONB. I would propose that we refuse this application, Chairman, but should members be minded to approve it, can we condition the length of the arena, please? Thank you.
Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Where I live happens to be within probably 80 metres of such a development. I never hear it. Or if I do, I have to be walking by it to hear it. So I really don't get the, wow, it's going to be really noisy argument, and the horses are turned out in the fields as well. So I'm afraid I don't really see, I mean, it's,
I respect Councillor Cole's wish to bring this before us, but I do not see any reason to not let this go ahead. Especially if there was lights and stuff all over it, then I would have started to step in and be raising a concern, but not from a noise perspective, and certainly not an oak framed building in the countryside that's got horses in it. I mean, I'd have to knock down half of England if that wasn't allowed.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. I do have a proposer on here for a refusal. I will be looking for a seconder pretty quickly. Councillor Bennyworth.
I'll just follow up Councillor Abbs there. I've got a long background in horses, and often it's not the horses that make the noise, it's the people. Noise I can't see as being a major factor in this. I'm also struggling to find reasons not to go with officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bennyworth. Do I have a second for Councillor Cole's proposal of refusal? I don't. Do I have an alternative proposal, please? Councillor Abbs, your proposal is to go with officer's recommendation.
The opposite, to go with officer's recommendation, of course, yes.
And do I have a second for that, please?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Councillor Barnett, okay. So we do have a condition, as I understand it, on light, which is already in there, Mrs. Cutts, and also I think there was a condition on mirrors and positioning of mirrors. Okay, and anything else, any other councillor brought up that needs to be included? Councillor Cole mentioned
it's the length of the arena, Chairman.
The length of the arena. We're saying a length. What length do we know?
40 metres, I think, was the preferred length.
40. Anybody get any observations on the length of being 40 metres? That's what's been sought, is it?
Well, Councillor Abbs has proposed it without conditions.
I don't mind the first two, but I don't understand the length making any difference here.
Okay, okay. Councillor Bennyworth's got his hand up. He's knowledgeable on these things.
Yeah, 40 metres smacks as possibly a little bit limited. I don't know whether I could.
This is domestic use.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking a sort of Olympic-size arena here, but 40 metres would certainly be the very lowest. I think we could go.
Mr. Till, Mrs. Cutts, can you do something for me, please, on this? We need not to be too restrictive if with Councillor Benny.
The point is that the Councillor Abbs hasn't actually made a proposal with any conditions attached to it, and that has been seconded by Councillor Barnett.
What you're saying is we can't put that condition on because we're adding after the proposal of what was.
We're adding after the proposal, absolutely.
We stick with the mirrors, we stick with the light. We can't do anything on the size of the arena. Thank you for that advice, Mrs. Mayor. With that conclusion, I'm going to now put it to the vote, and the recommendation is for the head of planning countryside be authorised to grant the planning permission. That's 20/02205 at White Cottage, North East Chieveley, for the construction of the oak frame tractor and garden machinery building and the construction of stable block and construction of an all-weather riding arena. Mrs. Mayor, would you conduct the vote, please?
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
For.
Councillor Barnett.
For proposal.
Councillor Bennyworth.
For officer's recommendation.
Councillor Cant.
For.
Councillor Cole.
Against.
Councillor Culver.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Wollaston.
For.
And Chair.
For.
That's carried 8-1.
Members, that application is approved. Members, thank you very much for your contribution. Before I close the meeting, I would like to resolve the issue between Councillor Cole and Councillor Vickers. Councillor Cole, I don't want this going on. Councillor Vickers, I'd like to conclude it this evening. Councillor Cole, are you happy with the response from Councillor Vickers with regard to his views on your chairmanship?
Well, it wasn't an unreserved withdrawal. There was a lot of caveats to it, Chairman, but I'm not making a fuss about it. I think I made my point.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers, you're quite happy to conclude
Well,
that?
I would. I apologise if I got a little bit heated. I felt quite passionately about this site, but I don't want to put all the blame or even any of it. Councillor Cal.
No, that's fine.
I just did what she felt was the right thing.
Thank you. I want to resolve the issue now and not get into a written debate after this meeting. We'll all shake hands.
Thank
We've all
you.
had a very good
Shake
meeting,
hands. Right.
and that's what the discussion generates. I say good night to you all, and we'll meet some next week, I think, district, and others in 3 weeks' time again. But thank you very much.
Chair.